Coffee and Cream on Hail Varsity Radio with Andrew Rogers and Damon Benning.
The 1-1 pitch is hit sharply into right center field. That's going to plug the gap. 1 run scores Carlson. Rounding third, headed for home is Goldschmidt. He's going to score on the double by Nolan Arenado. And the Cardinals continue to hit with 2 outs. Here in the 6th inning, it's now 6-3 St. Louis.
Now the pitch. Swing a blast to right field and deep. This is way back. Suzuki at the wall, and there it goes. A long home run for Keibert Ruiz. He is 3 for 3 tonight. He's just hit his 11th home run, and that's taken the Nationals lead back to 4. It's the Nationals 7 and the Cubs 3.
0-2. Swung on. It is to the left center field gap and deep. That ball's not going to be caught. It is gone. A grand slam for Chris Taylor gives the Dodgers the lead, 6-4.
The set by Fairbanks and the 1-1. That's way outside. He gets by. Here comes Smith. He scores standing up. The Rangers walk off the Rays in the opening game of this series on a wild pitch. Fellas come out of the dugout. They're bouncing in foul ground near the first base coach's box. What a way to end it. What a way to win it. And what a way to lose it. Rangers win it 3-2.
Good morning. Coffee and Cream in the morning on Hail Varsity Radio, powered by Currency. Ravi, Lulla, Andrew Rogers, live from the H&H Chevrolet stage at Hail Varsity Club. Good morning, Ravi.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
Oh, you know, just dandy. I got some new shoes I was telling you about today,
It's
which
true.
are
They
a little
look
tight
cool.
around the toe. Thank you.
They look very
I got
cool.
them. I got them on sale at Kohl's. I was just at Kohl's yesterday because I had 30% off, which 30% off at Kohl's really isn't 30% off anymore. Before, you could get everything but Nike products at Kohl's for 30% off. Now it's like, yeah, you can't get Adidas either.
It's like half the stuff.
Yeah, you can only get the Kohl's products,
Like
for
the Kohl's
30%
brand.
off.
Yeah.
And I'm like, not worth my time anymore.
No, I will say they do have some, like when their stuff goes on clearance, they do
great
have some
clearance
slamming
rack.
deals.
Oh, they have a great clearance rack. TJ Maxx does, Marshalls.
Yep.
Like those are some hot spots for
yeah.
my household. But aside from that, I'm like, is there anything on clearance anymore? Like, if I have a deal, a 30% off deal, 20% off, whatever it is, like, does it actually apply?
Yeah, probably not. There's too many exclusions. Bo knows.
He always knows. Yeah, so I don't know.
He's probably looking for deals right now.
I'm okay. Yeah, I'm sure he is.
I think Nebraska's still paying him. He's probably doing all right.
Yeah, just like the Mets are still paying Bonilla.
Love it.
But
it's my favorite.
Point the finger.
We'll only do that for another 20 years.
Yeah, no, we're down to like 12. We're down to like 2035, I think.
Not too shabby. Not too shabby, New York, and not too shabby, Bobby.
Good on you, Bobby Bonilla.
Why not?
I mean,
that's what you get for investing your money in a guy that just ran with it, right? Who would have thunk? Who would have thunk? Hey, Bobby, I have a great idea. I'm gonna invest all this money, into this one guy that I've heard great things about, and
is that one of those if it's too good to be true situations?
I'm not saying it was a pyramid scheme. Not gonna say it's
no,
one of
it
those
was
things.
a Ponzi scheme.
Yes, you're right. It started with a different P. And let's just say, I'll pay you back. I got you, Bobby. I'll pay you back. But if I don't, I promise I'll give you 8% on everything as it goes up. I promise you.
Listen, it's a great deal for Bobby Bonilla. Doesn't have to worry about anything. It's terrific.
He doesn't even have to invest any money because he knows every year his
check
return
is coming,
1.8 million.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Whatever it is. But yeah, baseball was the thing to watch last night, unless you were watching The Last Dance like I was.
The only thing to watch last night. Sports-wise?
Yeah.
We're at that time of year.
Yep, which is good. I mean, baseball's fun for me because the Cardinals are currently doing okay after the All-Star break. Great for the 75.5, which we'll talk to Thunder Dan about later on in the show. We have Brandon Vogel coming up at 8 o'clock. And Scott Richey, to close the show, he writes about Illinois football, Illinois men's basketball. We'll stick with football, though, and continue our schedule breakdown there. But I did see something that came out yesterday that Mozeliak, Cardinals owner, or one of one of the
Principals.
President of baseball operations, something like that.
Front office people.
Yeah, whatever. John Mosaic can go. Although he has built some pretty good baseball teams. He's kind of like Jerry Krause. Like, you like him sometimes, and then a lot of other times
you've done a pretty good job, but I just need you to not talk ever.
But he said, oh, man, definitely some change is needed for the Cardinals. Well, no dip, Sherlock. Thank goodness you and Watson back over there were pulling out the magnifying glass and thought, last place in the Central, not where we want to be.
That's some incredible detective work by them to be like, hey, this isn't going our way.
And he's like, change is coming. Change is coming. What does that mean? Like, are we adding starting pitching finally?
I would say we got, 13 days till the trade deadline?
I'm looking forward to seeing what he means by that.
Are they buyers?
I'm sure they're going to buy and sell.
Well, and that's so weird to me. I mean, I understand in general the philosophy behind like buying certain guys and selling other, but I don't know why you come out and say that unless you're kind of going all in to try and get back in it. But you just have too many teams to climb over.
Yes.
Like, I get that they're not that far back.
Right.
But the fact that there are, 4 teams they have to climb over just to...
That was going to be my yes and no take of the Central seems always up for grabs.
It does.
American League and National League.
Like, I would rather be... They're 11 and a half back? 10 and a half back
They
now?
may be less now after the win yesterday.
So they were 11 and a half back starting in the day yesterday.
Yep.
I would rather be...
They are 11 now.
11 back in second place, even if it's the same amount of games, right? Then 11th back in last place. Because it's so hard to climb over that many teams. It doesn't seem like it should be any different. But
good news, though, is when you are this far back and you have so many teams to jump over, you can rely on some of these other teams to knock off the top teams, too.
There's more opportunities for sure, but that goes both ways, right? There's more opportunities for you to advance. There's also more opportunities for you to fall back.
Step back,
right? So it's a tough spot to be in, even though, like you said, they're not that far back with this amount of time left. It's theoretically feasible, but I don't know. If I'm them, I'm not. I don't know that I'm looking at this season and be like, yeah, we have to buy.
Imagine being the White Sox at 40 and 55 and only being 8 back of the lead.
Isn't that incredible?
8 back of the lead.
That's like the AL Central back in, I want to say like the early to mid 2000s, where nobody was that good, and you had these kind of weird, mediocre Twins teams that would win the division at like 87 wins with like Johan Santana back there. And it was just the strangest division every year. And the Royals
sits like that.
And the Royals would be terrible, right? But
that's still true today.
Yes, also still true. They had a brief respite there in the 2015 range, but they'd be terrible. And in mid-July, they'd still only be like 6 games back because the rest of the division was just so much trash.
Well, what's crazy is the AL Central's the only division that doesn't have a 50-win team. Every other division has at least 2.
That's crazy. Like, that's nuts. They don't have a single one and everybody else has 2. That's how you know you're the...
And if you look at the, AL East, everybody's a 50
right
team.
Yeah, that division is stacked, which makes me mad because it's like,
imagine being the Yankees 5 games above 500 and you're 9 back first.
Right? So like, we'd be the best team in the AL Central. This is stupid.
Yeah. So we'll see what the Cardinals ultimately do there. I'm going to guess they go after starting pitching. If they do just buy, how fantastic that would be and what they can pull off, because they tend to always get the better end of a deal. And that dates back to Goldschmidt. That dates back to Arenado. So when you get these all-star guys,
even further back than that, they've been fleecing people for a couple decades now.
Right. But we'll just go with recent history and talk about those 2 deals. But they need pitching. I'd be curious to know if Cleveland's going to shop Bieber.
Yeah.
Because they could get a big return for him.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's not too old to where if I'm the Cardinals, I would be okay with giving up a Goldschmidt in a deal to get a Bieber. He should be like 29, maybe.
I was gonna say 30.
28. He's not as old as people think.
He's been around for a while. 28.
He's been good for a while. So that's why we think he's been around for a while.
He seems older because somebody told me the other day that Jimmy Butler's only 33. And I would have guessed him at like 36. He feels like he's been around forever, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, Bieber's been good. I mean, he was good immediately, right? And so it seemed like he'd been in the league for 3-4 years at that point.
Wouldn't it be nice to have a pitcher on your team that was good immediately? When was the last Red Sox pitcher that they developed that was good immediately?
Clay Buchholz.
Great name.
Maybe John Lester. I can't remember. I think John Lester was just before Buchholz, so probably Buchholz.
Which was
2007. He threw
15 years ago.
Yeah, he threw a no-hitter in his second start. And then he was good for most of a decade after that. But who else? They had Edwin Rodriguez, who was pretty good.
Eduardo Rodriguez?
Eduardo. Yep. Yeah, Edwin was a different guy. Eduardo Rodriguez, who they let go in free agency, which I was kind of cranky about.
Where did Eovaldi start? Did he start with the Sox?
Nope. He was a free agent signing right before 2018. Or I think they might have traded for him during 2018. Was he with the Rays before the Red Sox?
That sounds right.
I think he was with the Rays.
He was with the blue team.
He had double Tommy John, and so he was pretty cheap. But his stuff was obviously good. I think his motion is so violent that his arm is not a huge fan of what he
drafted by the Dodgers.
I thought he was with the Rays at some point.
He was.
Oh,
he
okay,
was 2018.
So they traded for him mid 2018. He ended up being really good for him in that playoff run.
So after 2016, so he was released on November 23rd, 2016. Nathan Eovaldi. He signed with the Rays 2 months later. So crazy, because when you see a guy get released, normally he gets picked up pretty
but that was
quickly.
An injury thing, I think, people weren't sure about his status.
Expected to miss the 2017 season, yes. So he was signed 1 year, $2 million with the Rays, and then that was in February. In July, they traded Eovaldi to the Red Sox.
Yeah, so for $2 million, they got a trade haul back because they took a flyer on a guy that they're like, let's see if he ends up being good, and he was, right?
Good enough.
Yeah, and then he ended up getting paid by the Red Sox pretty handsomely.
Oh, yeah, because he won 20? Oh, no, I'm thinking of Porcello.
Oh, yeah. No, yeah, he got overpaid as well. But
that's because he won 28 games. Well, also, he gave up 10 runs a game, but the Red Sox scored 12.
Yes, right. Back in the days when they had Mookie Betts and J.D. Martinez, R.I.P.
Oh, my mom comments, except for the Ozuna deal. Yeah, Cardinals struck out there. Oh, big time. Big time. I think his cleat is still stuck in the wall. But yeah, that may be the most embarrassing play.
It's probably
21st century.
Been 15 years since the Red Sox developed a pitcher that was good right away. They've got a couple guys now, Bello, I think is his last. He's a BB initials. And I always confuse the first name and the last name.
I'm with you.
Bello or something like that.
That sounds right.
He
sounds like a pitcher.
He's supposed to be pretty good, but it's a total crapshoot with these arms, right? Because you're just waiting for the first Tommy John surgery, and then you're trying to figure out, okay, do we invest in him or do we let him go, or and so it's pitching, figuring out how to develop pitching seems like it's so much more complicated than it used to be because everybody's going to have a catastrophic injury at some point, and you're just waiting to feel out the timing of that. And
everybody. And you just hope you have somebody that can step up and replace.
Well, and you're like, okay, so when do I pay this guy based on when the injury I know is coming?
It sounds like a lot about those running backs we've been hearing about.
It is. I mean, it's except for the pitchers get paid anyway.
Right.
It's like the running backs if they still got paid, which they do not.
It is definitely a little more cost effective on the pitcher,
right,
versus the body of the running back.
Well, right, because we're so comfortable with Tommy John surgery, which is like, we'll see you in 14 months.
It's because we know that pitchers can come back and throw harder.
Yeah, it's a pretty well established thing that's like, hey, this isn't going to end your career. It's probably not even going to affect it negatively.
No, it's actually going to benefit you.
Yeah, you're going to get about 3 miles an hour on your fastball. It'll be fine. and chill for a year.
And the pitcher is still going to be important to the game, where apparently the running back is not important to the game anymore.
It's not.
I mean,
that's why Saquon couldn't reach a deal.
They're important. It's just they're expendable is the problem. Pitchers are not expendable.
They just get bruised. They get beat up and bruised, and people want the next fresh thing. Because why take a banana that's a little brown when you can have a yellow one? They're both bananas.
And here's the thing: is if you can get 80 to 90% of the production for 10 to 20% of the cost, you're going to take it. It's like simple economics. And I know that it's terrible.
It doesn't seem right.
It's terrible for the running backs, right? I'm not saying that it's fair. I'm not saying that it's even the right thing.
And there's some running backs
do.
that deserve to continue to be paid while they're hurt. Ergo, Christian McCaffrey.
Absolutely,
He's
right?
somebody that will continue to get paid season after season.
Absolutely.
Even though he gets hurt.
Because his production is so good when he's healthy, right? You saw how he transformed the 49ers offense last year. But then you've got guys like Zeke who kind of destroyed the market. Like it was bad before, and then Zeke and Todd Gurley got paid and did not perform on those deals at all. And they got paid relatively young and kind of messed it up for everybody else way worse than it already was.
Yeah, the TG one was a little more of a risk because of his injury history, but Zeke definitely was the one that I think tanked it. But he also was the guy that went to whatever, the Caribbean, wherever he ended up to do training because of the I'll call it the luggage that he was carrying into the season off the field.
Yeah.
He was the guy that went away and then came back. And sometimes when I think those situations take place, guys check out. When guys hold out, they check out. Melvin Gordon was a good example of that too. You can just move on quickly because you get a guy in that room that's hungry.
Exactly.
He's fresh and he's hungry. He just wants to be the one. Who was the best running back in that backfield last year for Dallas? Was it Tony Pollard or was it Zeke?
It's Pollard.
It was Pollard, which is why Pollard is going to be the guy.
Yeah. And then in 3 years when Pollard wants to get paid, he's not going to get paid either. Unless Jerry Jones has another like episode where he's like, yeah, I want to pay all the running backs. Like it's such a, and I get it. It's not fair at all. I don't begrudge the running backs at all for this kind of, they're not protesting, but you know what I mean? They've been pretty vocal about the salary deal. And I get it, right? They're valuable parts of the team. Part of the problem is though, the gap, but like the top 2-3 guys are elite, right? They're in a
McCaffrey, Derrick Henry,
Barkley,
Nick Chubb's up there, and Barkley.
Yeah, so you got 4 guys, right? The gap between the 5th guy and the 20th guy is real narrow. And you're usually not in that top 3-4 for very long. So it's like, okay, do I want to pay this guy or do I want to pay the 6th best guy a third of the price, right? It makes sense in terms of how you want to manage a cap. With the NFL, you got the hard cap. You're going to have to spend on wide receivers now. You're going to have to spend on quarterbacks now. You got to spend on pass rush, and you got to spend on corners. You got to start. It's the same thing with linebackers. Linebackers don't get paid unless they're pass rushers now. Is it an important position? Yeah, absolutely. The problem is you have to cut somewhere if those guys are for sure getting paid, right? Quarterbacks get paid. They want their wide receivers. You have to pay the wide receivers, right? Pass rushers and corners are the hardest things to find in football on defense. Yeah. Elite pass rushers and lockdown corners, so much harder to find on defense than really quality linebackers.
And then your elite tackles on offense.
Right,
on the offensive line.
So those are the guys that get paid. Interior offensive linemen don't really get paid. Middle linebackers, outside linebackers that aren't pass rushers.
Depends on who you are.
Running backs. Even tight ends are getting paid now because they can fill a couple of those roles. They can protect your quarterback and they can supplement your receiving game. With a hard cap, that means you have to find places to trim fat everywhere else. And it's not fair to the guys that end up being on the chopping block or that end up not getting paid. But until the NFL, and I don't think they're going to, until the NFL relaxes on salary cap, somebody's going to end up not getting what they deserve.
Well, and I'll tell you this too. If a running back were to stay healthy, he would always get paid.
Yeah.
Like if you were on the field consistently,
but it's almost impossible.
Like Derrick Henry is on the field consistently. I know I'm talking about an elite running back here, but say he's not Derrick Henry. Say the running back for this example is, who's a guy I was going to say Javonte Williams, but he hasn't been around long enough. Let's say, gosh, everybody's so young now.
That's because they just keep recycling them. It seems like there's a new running back every year at most teams.
Let's say you're David Montgomery's level of game. Okay. But you've stayed healthy your whole career and you play for a really good team. Say you play for the 49ers for this example.
Okay.
You would get paid. Like if Elijah Mitchell stayed healthy throughout his entire career, didn't get hurt, like I bet he would have gotten paid.
you'd get paid.
Because they probably wouldn't have made the trade for McCaffrey because Mitchell was super productive and successful in that backfield. But that's the line you have to hit. You have to stay healthy, and you can't.
No,
you just can't.
For what's required of the position, it's almost impossible to consistently stay healthy. If you can get, like, I'm going into this year thinking if they can have McCaffrey healthy for the right 12 games,
please, because he's in my dynasty league,
I'm thrilled, right? As long as it's the playoff as part of it, and then whatever crucial games they need him in the regular season. Just be healthy for the right 12. And that's barely 50%. If we're talking about 49ers going to the Super Bowl, which is obviously their goal from where they were last year, that's 17 games plus 3 at the minimum, maybe 4.
Right.
That's 20 or 21 games. I'm asking him to be healthy for 12 of those, which means that's what, 55, 60%?
Yeah,
12 out of 20 is 60%.
Roughly.
So that's all I'm asking. I'm not asking him to play 18, 19, 20 games. I just want him to be there for the right 12 because it is not reasonable to expect running backs to be healthy for 20 games a year.
Sure, we're just going to do what's asked.
Like, they're not protected the way quarterbacks are. They're not protected the way corners are. I know penalty-wise corners aren't, but they are in a situation they're not going to really get hit in the same way running backs are.
You're normally doing the hitting if you're a corner.
And let's be honest, you're not hitting real hard. It's more, tripping guys up.
If you're a safety, you're hitting hard.
But
not a corner.
If you're a cover corner, you're not doing a lot of hitting.
Pass breakups.
You're not taking a lot of violent hits. Relatively, right? Every hit in the NFL is violent. I get it.
Yeah, unless you pick one off and then here comes.
Right. But for the most part, you're pretty well protected by the nature of your position. Wide receivers are incredibly well protected now by their rules. Running backs don't have that. Linebackers don't have that. Linemen, especially interior linemen, don't have that. It is not reasonable to expect those guys to stay healthy for 20, 21 games a year. It's just not. And if you can't do that, like you said, you're not getting paid because availability is the best thing they can bring to the table at this point. So you don't have to sign 4
Where
guys.
have I heard that? Availability
is the best ability. That sounds like a DB-ism.
No, it sounds like something I've heard up in Lincoln, maybe from the head coach. We'll continue.
Well, what's the difference?
Our schedule breakdown. Nice. We'll continue our schedule breakdown of the Nebraska football schedule later on in the show. We're talking Illinois, that game October 6th, and that is week 6. And then they'll have the bye week on October 14th. We'll continue throughout the week with the rest of the teams as well. So tomorrow we're talking Northwestern again. Last week we talked about them a lot. We'll have Louis Vicar on tomorrow. But we'll also touch on some Northwestern football today because new information surfaced and we want to react to that. We'll react to episodes 3 and 4 of The Last Dance, which
the Dennis Rodman episodes.
I have a question for you because I don't know if we've gotten as far as you kind of teased me yesterday
with Scotty Pippen?
With the Pippen stuff. I don't think we've gotten there yet.
Not quite. There were some sprinkles, but we're not quite there
yet.
I
saw the sprinkle and I'm like, is that it? But then they stopped. And I'm like, okay, it can't be just
There's a big one still coming.
Right?
There's a big one still coming.
So we'll do that. We'll talk to Brandon Vogel at 8 o'clock as well. We'll do the Sports Six-Pack today. We have Thunder Dam. We'll talk a little betting at 9, and then Scott Richey at 9:45. Stick around. More Coffee and Cream after the break.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 5 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 4 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 3 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 2 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 1 minute. Rogers and Benning will be back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream with Rogers and Benning on Hail Varsity Radio.
Welcome back. Coffee and Cream in the morning on Hail Varsity Radio, powered by Currency. Ravi, Lulla, Andrew Rogers, 590 ESPN Radio in Omaha, live on Twitter, live on YouTube, the Hail Varsity Radio and Hurrdat Sports YouTube pages. If you miss anything from today's show, make sure to go back and listen to the podcast at Spotify, Apple, Google, Amazon. And then, well, I'm like thinking about, can you listen to it on Amazon?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I'm not sure.
I was going to apologize if podcast did not get up yesterday promptly. I know we had a message on Twitter that that was asking about the podcast, and we definitely checked up on that, and hopefully those ended up getting up so you guys could listen back. But if not, we'll make sure of it today. The phone line, 888-638-4876. If you'd like to get involved, you can send us a comment via YouTube, and we'll see it there. We'll get to those on today's show as well. Thomas in the opening hour said if you keep talking about those Twins teams, you'll accidentally summon BC. Well, he'll be on the show tomorrow, so maybe the Eagle call is out for Brian Christopherson. No, I spent a lot of time yesterday. Well, okay, I took a break from Last Dance. I watched episode 3.
Okay.
It was the dentist. I feel like I had to after the Rodman episode. I felt drunk after watching that episode.
Well, then there was more Rodman in 4.
Yeah, I know. I couldn't believe it. Well, they teased me because it's like, all right, we're going to take a break. And he's going to go AWOL for 48 hours. And then it turned out to be maybe 48 months. So I had to take a break because I didn't really know how to feel, because you set me up oddly yesterday. Like, hey, you may not like Pippen once the series gets to a certain point. So then I kept thinking about that as I'm watching it. Like, is it going to be this episode? Is it going to be that?
So I don't want to say you won't like him. You just might feel differently about it.
Right. Okay.
I think history has been very kind to Scotty Pippen. I understand he was underpaid. And we didn't get to this yesterday, but in episode 2, Michael Wilbon, who was a Chicago sports writer forever, talks about how underappreciated Scottie Pippen was. And that's just not true. Underpaid, yes. Underappreciated, absolutely not. He made the NBA's 50 greatest players of all time in 96. He had played only 8 full seasons at that point and never scored more than 22 points a game. Not that points per game are the be-all, end-all, but he was given way more of a benefit of the doubt because of the winning they had done, because of his defensive prowess, and they overlooked some of the counting stats that weren't there because of the situation he was in. And so I don't think he was underappreciated at all. He was literally named one of the 50 best players of all time.
In the eyes of the national view of the NBA.
Yes.
Yes.
And that was voted on by former players, former coaches, a whole bunch of people, right? So I don't think you can legitimately say he was underappreciated. He was absolutely underpaid for the last half of that deal for sure. But again, I think we're going to start, and this is getting into episodes 3 and 4 here, I think you're going to start seeing some of the breadcrumbs that I was talking about, and they actually kind of gloss over them a little bit. And I think maybe the only reason is because I'm on my 4th time watching it. The 2nd and 3rd times, you start to pick up some things. Like we had the infamous migraine game in episode 3.
Yeah, that's the one I thought that you were. Well, when they said it, I'm like, oh, this is what Ravi was talking about. And then it was over, at the snap of a finger. It was, hey, he has a migraine. Hey, he can't see. Now he's 0 for 6. I'm not playing anymore. And it's like, okay, well, that was quick. You would have probably elongated that storyline if it were to go deeper into Pippen. So I'm like, now when you said in the opening segment of, hey, they sprinkle things in.
They do.
I'll watch for that now, because I think I was set up for a long storyline.
Oh, no, they don't drop a bomb on Pippen. And I think it's because Jordan likes Pippen. Jordan had final cut on The Last Dance. So anything that he didn't like didn't make it in. So obviously it's really kind to Michael Jordan for the most part.
I'm happy he didn't cut out any of the reactions that the players got to watch other
interviews. Those are the best.
Oh,
those are
what
the best.
A great piece to that documentary.
Yes.
You never see stuff like that.
Incredible decision by the filmmakers to show different people, whether it's Phil Jackson or Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan
laughing at each other.
Michael Jordan watching the Isaiah Thomas clip is hilarious.
Oh my goodness!
Because before he even starts, it's like, it's going to be BS.
Yeah, because he's like,
because he hates him so much.
Oh, he's okay. So I can have sportsmanship when we lose.
Yeah,
so you guys can just walk off the floor, and then you're going to get some BS excuse from Isaiah that teams before did it, so I could do it too. Oh yeah, just because you jump off a bridge doesn't mean that it's your turn now.
But so that's a really great idea that they had that I think adds a lot to the documentary. But I legitimately think they did their best to not make Scottie Pippen look that bad. Because if you really wanted to, you could really go into the fact that he waited until October to have a surgery and he missed 35 games. That's half the season almost, right? 82-game season. He misses 35 of them. That's almost half the season. And then before he comes back, he demands a trade and said he's never playing for the Bulls again. We caught that in episode 4, I think, which they kind of gloss over.
Right.
And the fact they're like, oh, he's back now. It's like, yeah, after demanding a trade and saying he will never shoot up for the Bulls again.
Right.
Like, that's some pretty high.
And then he comes out and says, well, I knew all along that this wasn't going to work. And
yeah, it's like, okay, Scotty, whatever you say, Scotty.
Is Scottie Pippen the second best player the Bulls have ever had?
Ooh, that's tough because
there's some teams he could play for that he might have been the best player if he'd been on that.
I'd say yes
in those franchises that he could have been the best player of that franchise.
For his career, probably. The problem is you've got, like, in a short stint, Derrick Rose won an MVP.
Yep.
Like, his ceiling was higher than Pippen's ceiling ever was.
But he just didn't have
he didn't have the longevity that Pippen did with the Bulls.
Long-term career with
so it depends on what you want, right?
And Jimmy Butler was great.
But he's probably at his best
recent right now.
And he's probably at his best years after that.
Yep, at
right?
Miami.
So, like, dragging two Miami teams to the finals is going to be the first line of his post-career like write-up, right? So, it's hard to say. It's hard to say because it's also really hard to separate Pippen from Jordan in terms of accomplishments, right? It's like, yeah, Pippen won 6 titles. Does he win any without Jordan? Probably not.
And by the way, bringing Rodman into that team, I think that's the most fascinating thing from that Bulls era because he came from a team that the Bulls fans did not like.
Hated.
They hated the Pistons.
Not just the fans, the players, like the players
league.
You brought the villain into your team with a lot of baggage.
But I'd rather play with them than play.
100%. I think that's why they knew they needed him.
That was the mindset. There is. I know for a fact that he knows he's good at 2 things.
Yes,
he's good at defending and he's good at rebounding.
Getting some rebounds.
And knowing those 2 things, you can be successful when you have Michael Jordan. You put pieces around him, which absolutely goes back to what you're saying about Pippen and your concern of calling him the second best player ever in Bulls history because he was just another piece to Michael Jordan.
And he was the most important piece outside of Jordan, but I have no idea what his career looks like.
But if Michael Jordan got hurt and it was Scottie Pippen and Dennis Rodman running the show, how many games would they win?
It's a playoff team for sure, assuming the rest of the roster makes sense. I mean, you saw it a little bit in 94 when Jordan's playing baseball that first year, right? They win like 54 games or something like that. They have a good year, kind of fall apart in the playoffs. But the thing that Jordan brought to the table that Pippen didn't, and you'll get this in a couple episodes, I think, is the mindset of demanding a certain level of competitiveness of
excellence,
almost demanding perfection, knowing you weren't going to get there.
I've been seeing that already.
Right?
I've been seeing spurts of that.
They lay it out.
Nobody worked harder than him.
They lay it out explicitly when Jordan leaves to go play baseball. And that's the thing that Pippen was never going to bring to the table. And you wonder if Pippen ends up in a different situation where Michael Jordan doesn't require that of him, what does Scottie Pippen become? Because I think that's a really interesting thing that people don't talk about very often. But to go back to Rodman real quick, I think it's possible that Phil Jackson's greatest accomplishment as a coach is getting 3 productive seasons out of Dennis Rodman.
With all of
with everything going on,
traits and
just like understanding how to manage his personality.
But I don't even know if Phil did that. I think Michael did that.
I think it was both.
I think Michael told Phil how to handle it, and so Phil trusted Michael.
So I think on court it was Michael. I think off court it was Phil.
Yeah, see, I still think off the court it was Michael in Phil's ear saying, "You just got to let him do him. Like we'll be okay. Like we'll figure it out."
I don't know. I don't think Michael was going to let him go on vacation.
Well,
I don't think Michael was letting him go to Vegas.
He didn't want him to go to Vegas, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So maybe it was more of a tandem thing.
Yeah. I think off court it was Phil, on court it was Michael.
Anybody else fist bump though when you heard? And the Chicago Bulls have won their first NBA title. And I was like, this is
Here we go. Here we go.
And then, of course, I didn't want to stop because the tease to the whole show was Jerry comes out with the news mid-season about Phil Jackson.
Oof.
Let's talk Northwestern next.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 4 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 3 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 2 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 1 minute. Rogers and Benning will be back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream with Rogers and Benning on Hail Varsity Radio.
Welcome back, Coffee and Cream. Ravi, Lulla, Andrew Rogers, 590 ESPN Radio, live on Twitter, live on YouTube. Happy to have you with us. The phone line, 888-638-4876. The socials, Hail Varsity Radio and Hurrdat Sports YouTube pages. You can get involved there. We change gears. We'll talk a little Big Ten action now, but we'll stick with one team, and then we'll follow up maybe with some questions for Brandon Vogel, and we'll get into Nebraska football with him as well at 8 o'clock. But news came out surrounding the Northwestern football team again. So for one, they lost their top commit from the 2023 class. That's from, No Surprise Alley. Mm-hmm. But the big news coming from Adam Rittenberg yesterday, when he tweeted out 8 former Northwestern players have retained noted civil rights attorney Ben Crump and Chicago law firm Levin and Porcanti for a lawsuit against the university for physical, sexual and emotional abuse related to the hazing incidents that took place in the program. Now, as I read further on, I don't know if it was Crump or Levin that had said this, but it was not a case about Coach Fitzgerald. Like that's what he said. This is not a case about Coach Fitzgerald. This is a case about Northwestern as an institution.
Yeah.
And I think that's a key point to this whole thing. It's not just about one. We're not going after one man.
Yeah.
Because this one man was a part of something bigger.
Well, we saw it with the baseball team, right? Like this is not localized to the football team.
But this is a case about Northwestern and everybody at Northwestern not doing their due diligence in this moment. Now, as I read some further things, because as you know, as DB knows, as the listeners know, I ask a lot of questions. Like I am Mr. He calls me Doubting Thomas, which is oddly enough my middle name. But
fitting.
But it's just because I need.
Well, you're
answers,
curious and you want information.
but that's how it leads to my opinion. I need other people to tell me, whoever are the experts in the case. I need them to tell me one thing. I need to get points from this group. I need points from this group, and then I can form my opinion.
Gathering context.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, we're talking to Louis Vicar tomorrow, and he had a story that spoke with a variety of different players. So ever since the scandal broke, he's been reaching out to current and former players, trying just to get anything about their experience during their careers, whether it involved hazing or just the program culture, things like that. One player felt that a lot of the responsibility for hazing in the team culture that allowed hazing incidents to happen lie more with the players than it does with Fitzgerald and his coaching staff. So I also think that goes back to what I said. This is not a case about coach. It's about the institution, just based on what I'm hearing from one player here. Now, another player from over 10 years ago chimed in, and he acknowledged the car wash thing, but he never witnessed it. And he said, I'm pretty confident it went on my freshman year. Don't remember it ever talked about much after that. The Gatorade shake happened for sure, but he said definitely didn't force anyone to do it. The guys that did it seemed happy to participate in it.
Okay.
And then at least two other players claimed hazing did not take place, calling the allegations absurd, disgusting, ridiculous. So you hear all these different points. And this is why I think this case is going to go so much. It's going to be such a long case because you have points from so many different groups of, hey, I'm on this side. Hey, I'm on this side. And it comes down to, okay, who do you ultimately trust? And how much does it take for one side, which I'm going to say the side throwing the accusations out there, how many people have to step up, whether it's a certain number, to beat out the other group? Because if there's 100 people that say it didn't take place and only 12 that said it did, is that enough? Because a lot of times it is enough. Well, you just need 1, 2, or 3 people to say it did for it to happen.
So here's the tricky part with these types of situations, right? Is the same event can be viewed differently by different participants, whether willing or unwilling, right? And that's the first question, is if you're willingly participating or unwillingly participating, you're going to view a situation dramatically differently.
Yeah.
Right?
Are you laughing about it? Are you uncomfortable about it?
Is it something that you has like mentally scarred you, right?
The personality of the person.
It's a very similar situation, I think, to the was it Jonathan Martin, the tackle for, or the guard from the Dolphins with the Richey Incognito thing. Richey Incognito probably treated countless players that way throughout his career,
but it bugged Martin the most
and
for him to say something about
most of those guys either didn't care or didn't care enough to speak up about it. Does that make what Richey Incognito did right? Absolutely not. It just means it didn't bother some of those guys. So you could have 100 guys saying hazing didn't take place because they didn't view what happened as hazing. They viewed it as team bonding or culture building or whatever, right? So you could have the exact same events take place and have 30 different views and stories and interpretations of what it actually was. It seems like at least some of these events definitely took place. The question is, was it hazing? Was it harassment? Was it illegal? I mean, to be honest, did it cross the line of being an illegal activity with unwilling participants?
Mm-hmm.
That's where this gets really complicated because, and here's the thing that I need people to remember, whether you like it or not, the way that these things are usually both legally and in like corporate situations usually defined is, does the person receiving the action take offense to it? That's how you judge harassment in a corporate workplace and generally in a legal setting as well, if it is unwanted by the recipient. So it doesn't matter if the 100 guys who participated willingly didn't think it was a big deal or didn't think it was hazing. It matters if the 12 guys that were not willingly participating, and those are just numbers we're throwing out there, 12 guys that were not willingly participating, how they felt about it, how it impacted them, and how they viewed the situation. If they felt they were forced to participate in something that they didn't want to participate in, then you have a problem regardless of how everyone else felt about it. And so does that get really complicated? Absolutely. But I think it's important for people to remember that that is generally the standard that is held. It's not, oh, most people weren't bothered by it. It's like, it doesn't matter if most people weren't bothered by it. It matters that some people were. And I understand people don't always like the way that that's how things are structured, and that's the standard that's held now. But that is the standard that's held now, whether you like it or not. So it's important to keep that in mind.
And DB brought up a point last week about eyewitness testimony in court, that what do you trust as a jury? What do you trust as, a prosecuting attorney? You trust one eyewitness testimony to really put somebody away. So ultimately, what you said, it shouldn't even need to be 12. It should only need to be one.
Yeah, and you've got more than one. I mean,
right.
We've got at least 8 that have got an attorney.
That's what guarantees it more, because if you really put it if you're going off the scale of, okay, if I only need one eyewitness testimony in court to make somebody, like, if I witnessed a crime, if I saw you breaking into Shane's car and I said, hey, it was Ravi in a backwards blue hat, and I know it because he's wearing a light blue hat right now in court, and that's the same hat, then they would be like, oh, okay, you saw it, you're guilty. So if there's 8 people that said, hey, I saw Ravi in the light blue hat that broke into Shane's car, then you're going to be, it just
especially
reaffirms,
if the stories are consistent.
Right. It just reaffirms the guilt. Now, that's the big key here. How consistent are the stories going to be? There is a lot of consistency in the story. I would say,
from what we've heard,
80 to 90% of the stories seem consistent about the hazing. But what seems inconsistent is
whether Fitzgerald knew about it is one of the things.
That's one. But also, 2, some of the accusers coming out and saying, hey, I'm only after Coach Fitzgerald. Like, I'm trying to get Coach Fitzgerald out of here.
Yeah.
Like that's my goal here, is to get him away. Well, then when you have this notion to do something different and not just
when you've got a motivation.
Yep. You have an external motivation to take somebody away. Now it doesn't seem like it's all for the right reasons anymore. Now it's like, hey, this was my goal the whole time. So now that's what I think they'll balance. Not to say that that's going to change anything.
Right. Well, and you can make the argument that the reason they wanted Fitzgerald out was so that this didn't happen to anybody else, right? To me, that's pretty easy to explain away. I agree that having a motive to take action on something like this outside of just, hey, we're speaking up because it's the right thing to do, does murky the waters a bit. But to me, that's a pretty easy one to explain, because they personally hold Fitzgerald responsible. Now, whether and like we said, the Ben Crump, the players that have retained him are going after the university in general, not just Pat Fitzgerald, or not specifically Pat Fitzgerald. But it's pretty easy to draw the line of, hey, we hold this guy responsible for the things that happened to us. The interesting thing to me, and maybe it's not even that interesting, is the people that think it's reasonable that this could have been going on for 10 years, it seems like, if not longer. would think that Pat Fitzgerald was unaware of it. Maybe he didn't endorse it, but thinking he was unaware of it is ludicrous to me.
Yeah.
Like, it may not have been a team-sanctioned thing.
It's what I said last week. You know, it could be something as simple as, I don't want to know about it. I don't, like, you're walking through, I'm not looking. I don't want to know about it.
But that means you know about it. But I mean, the extent of it,
maybe you could
maybe
assume
not,
because you didn't see it. So, like, that's what I think really took place.
I still think,
I just don't want to know about it. Don't talk to me. I'm not going to listen, which is the wrong.
And I still think it's too generous
seat to sit in.
Yeah.
If you are the head coach of a football
Absolutely.
program, because you should be standing by your players no matter what. Brandon Vogel up next.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 4 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 3 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 2 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 1 minute. Rogers and Benning will be back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream on Hail Varsity Radio with Andrew Rogers and Damon Benning.
Welcome back. All right, let's do this with Brandon Vogel now. We'll change gears and talk Nebraska football. He's the managing editor for Hail Varsity at Brandon L. Vogel on Twitter. Brandon, good morning. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. How are you guys?
Good, man. Good. How are you?
Doing pretty well. Feels like, Big 12 got underway with its media days last week, and the SEC circus kicks off this week. So it feels like a new season is officially beginning.
Yeah, and Big 10 media days, of course, taking place next week. Let's start right there because, we kind of just came off the topic of Northwestern football again as that resurfaced yesterday. Brian Kelly saying was that at SEC Media Day?
Yep.
That a coach needs to be aware of what's happening in his locker room. And now even looking at who Nebraska is sending, right, to media days. You have Piper, you have Reimer, you have Sims. What do you think is the overall thesis of the message that people will hear from Nebraska at media day next week?
It's interesting with Sims, as a transfer and as the presumed starter at quarterback. Matt Rule's Nebraska is the only Nebraska he knows. So I suspect you'll get a little bit different from him. I think for veterans and two in-state guys in Piper and Reimer, there'll be a lot of kind of compare and contrast, which is always difficult for those players to do, but it's what people are interested in. So I expect you'll hear a lot about, media days are always interesting. It's ultimate optimism part of the calendar, and it should be. Everybody's 0-0 to use a cliche, but I think that'll be it. I would be surprised, in the players that were selected themselves, it felt very consistent to me with what we've seen from this staff through the spring and summer. I mean, Luke Reimer, I think, was a player that Matt Rule mentioned in one of his very first press conferences. Ethan Piper has been a player who has come up a lot through spring football. And then Sims, we only got to hear from him, I believe, once during spring football. But kind of the narrative around him is really highly touted recruit, was a major get for Georgia Tech, was their starter for 3 seasons, when he wasn't injured. But he's somebody who has pro tools and pro potential. But if if he'd elected to go to the draft after this past season rather than transfer and try something else, probably would have been pretty borderline. I mean, perhaps very borderline. So the pitch there is, hey, I was just in the NFL. You could be, I think, a starter in this league. Let me help you get there. So it's interesting that you've got kind of 2 holdovers plus a new guy.
Brandon, how important with the guys that they selected to go to media days, do you think it was that they are kind of on the same page, or at the very least speaking the same language that Matt Rule has been sort of preaching throughout his first several months here on the job?
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the primary reasons they were selected. Obviously, you want, I think, team leaders, but players that you don't even have to worry about them staying on message because it is the message for those guys. And media days gets a little wild at times. The Big Ten actually, in comparison to some other leagues, really gives you a lot of time with the players. There's 45-minute breakout sessions where players are at individual podiums. And, you get 20, 30 minutes into that, and the questions start to get a little bit wild. So you got to have guys who are capable of handling that. But, what Nebraska didn't do, and I don't know that most teams do this, but, it may not be, I don't think you want to go into selecting, well, who's the 3 best sound bites on the team. And that's not what they did here. I think they picked people who they're confident will represent the values Matt Rule is trying to instill.
Brandon, I'm sitting here and I'm still thinking about the whole Northwestern situation and knowing the locker room and going back to just what Kelly said, at SEC media days. How often is it, do you think, that a head coach doesn't know what's going on in his locker room?
That piece of it kind of strains credulity a little bit for me. I mean, I think they have an obligation to know, particularly with instances like those that are being described at Northwestern. But I think a big factor in this is, okay, so all three of us here played sports, at some level, at some point in our lives. And I'm probably the oldest one here, almost certainly. Like, I remember, my freshman year of football in high school, like you walk into a totally new team and you're in 2 days, and these teams are kind of like their own little deserted islands, and that they have their own culture, and you're dealing with young people, and there are rituals and routines, and culture is constantly shifting. So like what may have been okay or even just allowed to happen when I was in that position was probably different than what it was for either of you, and at a different stage. And it can be hard, I think, to kind of keep up with culturally what is going to be accepted, but you have to. And I think it's particularly hard for coaches like Pat Fitzgerald, where what they have done has worked at Northwestern for sure, and they've been there a long time. So you kind of get in this potential spot of stasis where it's like, well, what we're doing is working, so I don't want to make big, broad changes for that reason. And when you stay there a long time, I think you become a little bit more insulated to what is happening outside in culture more broadly. And that's where the friction, I think, can come.
Brandon, one of the things that I've been thinking about, and I tend to agree with you, that it is difficult to believe that that Pat Fitzgerald wasn't aware, at least to some degree, of what was going on. But I guess if we give him the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, he's telling us the truth here and didn't know, I guess to what degree do we hold him responsible in that sense of being either blissfully unaware or borderline negligent in not having a better grasp of what's going on in his locker room?
Yeah, I think there definitely would need to be some ramifications for that, because I also look at that as borderline negligent.
Mm-hmm.
And when we go back to this, like, that was kind of the initial report, right? Like the first thing that came out was and it wasn't like they hired kind of a law firm off of an ambulance chasing law firm. Like, this was a serious law firm that does this, and their findings. It even said it in the president's announcement of Fitzgerald's termination that there's no evidence yet that Pat Fitzgerald knew of this. So the response to this really kind of escalated very, very quickly. And I think if all it's there about Fitzgerald's knowledge or involvement in this is what the facts that have been presented so far, that's probably not, in my opinion, for him or anybody else that was in a similar situation, maybe isn't a fireable offense. I would be willing, and I think this is kind of just my general setting, like, okay, this has come to light now, we know about it, everybody knows about it, let's give him an opportunity to rectify some things. But it's tough. I mean, it's a judgment call that somebody has to make, and Northwestern's president did. And I don't know if they wish they would have taken a little bit more time with it, but it seems like that's where things are headed.
We're talking to Brandon Vogel, managing editor for Hail Varsity, at Brandon L. Vogel on Twitter. B-Vogues, let's go to the Huskers here. How are they going to win in year one? Is it going to be predicated on defense or offense? Because so far this offseason, we've heard a ton about what the defense will look like, not if it will bring success like we saw last year at Syracuse. And also on the offensive side of things, we've heard very little to nothing about what that will look like.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think with the players that return on both sides of the ball, I tend to go into this season right now thinking that defense is a little bit better off. When you look at a player like Reimer, you look at 4 starters back in the secondary. Defensive line is the area where you've got some question marks, but to whatever degree you want to put stock into spring football, I thought there were some encouraging signs there as well. So Offensively, you're going to have a new quarterback. You've got some things to sort out at receiver. The O-line has a lot to prove. And running back room, I think, is pretty well stocked. That's kind of the broad lay of the land. So I think this then becomes offensively, one of the ways I'll be trying to judge this offense early in the season. Can it stay on the field? Can it kind of consistently produce drives that, and some of this was by design, some of it was just by ineffectiveness, but with how Nebraska wanted to play offense, I think, you think of kind of the classic Scott Frost approach that we probably most remember from Central Florida. We never saw it get to those heights in Nebraska. It puts a strain on defenses. You're on the field a lot as a defense. And I think for Nebraska to win games in 2023, they'll need to control the clock, which doesn't always mean winning time of possession necessarily, but be able to control the flow offensively. And then let a defense that at Syracuse, at least under Tony White, was very active and produced a good number of havoc plays, kind of exploit the fact that it's not going to be asked to be on the field for 34, 35 minutes almost every Saturday. I think that's the simplest path.
Brandon, you touched on something there that kind of sent an alarm bell off in my head, and because we're previewing Illinois later today as part of the schedule breakdown, and what you said kind of rang in my head about staying on the field, kind of controlling time of possession, things like that, things that Illinois did really well last year. And then I remember, okay, we've got a rule change this year where the clock doesn't stop on first downs anymore until after we're in the last 2 minutes of a half. Is that something that you could see Nebraska maybe trying to use to their advantage in the way that they kind of structure how they play out games to, let's say the offensive line doesn't get where they want it to be and the receivers never really emerge the way they would need to kind of put things in a more manageable position for them? Is that something you could see this year?
I think so. It's funny, that rule change in particular with offensive coordinator Marcus Satterfield's, espoused love of the huddle, kind of potentially go hand in hand if you're invested in trying to keep your defense off the field, which I think most football teams are, unless they're just like super up tempo, super, high flying. So it gets interesting when you stop and think about it, of just say, okay, it's 1st and 10 from the 25 and you throw an 11-yard out. In the past, clock stops. Now it doesn't, and Nebraska's probably going to huddle. They're not going to rush to the line. I'm sure they'll use pace at times as sort of a curveball or a weapon. But it does help those teams, and it makes the Big Ten super interesting because there are so many teams. It kind of becomes, unless you're Ohio State, I mean, we've seen Michigan win the conference the past 2 years with a very, very straightforward, like, be good on the lines, run the football, play defense approach. Has done it at a higher level than even kind of the usual suspects of Wisconsin, Iowa, Northwestern. I'd put Minnesota in that group too. And then we saw Illinois kind of join the fold of kind of classic football. And I think this clock change rule, which I don't personally like it because I want as much football as possible, it does help teams that are able to execute that type of approach.
Vogel, I'm happy you brought up Illinois because that's who we're talking about today. We've been doing schedule breakdowns all this week and last, and we get into the weeds with Illinois and Scott Richey this week, or today, I should say. But I kind of want to ask you maybe a more leaning Illinois question here because of all they lost in the secondary, yet their defense is going to look completely different with Ryan Walters gone at Purdue. Do you think that's something that they can replicate? Last year's defense, maybe even the defense of a year before when they went 5-7, but under Brett Bielema, can it continue to replicate without Ryan Walters there?
Yeah, that's one thing that gives me a little bit of pause. I mean, I think the bigger one is probably just the sheer amount of talent lost in the secondary. And they're okay there. They're just not as proven. They're not going to have 3, first 2 days of the draft picks back there, I don't think. But they might have 2 on the defensive line, which will help in Jerzon Newton and Keith Randolph. they're going to be really good up front defensively. And, you know, as we were kind of talking about, this is Brett Bielema's happy space. So they promoted from within to fill that open DC role. So I do think there's a good chance for continuity. I think they gave up less than 10 points a game last year. They're probably not going to hit that.
Yeah, it was like 12.8, I think.
12.8, okay. I'd be surprised if they jumped all the way to, say, 22 or 24, though. I think this is still going to be a pretty good defense. And then, you know, in terms of what they're able to put up offensively, obviously have a big hole at running back. And they'll be playing under a new quarterback too. So the margins get thinner for Illinois, but they are not a team that I think I could write off right now in the Big Ten West race based on anything we just discussed.
Yeah, they're only given 6.5 too as their over under win total, which I think is incredibly low.
Yeah, they've got a really manageable schedule.
Yeah, it's tough in the West. You know, you get past Wisconsin and Illinois, and then it's just kind of a jumble of teams that are right there in between 5 and 7 for their win totals. And you kind of gotta, I mean, the Big Ten's always murky. In the last year of the Big Ten West, I think it's kind of perfectly murky, I guess is the term I'll go with.
Brandon, sticking with Illinois for a second here, and the job that Brett Bielema's done in his first couple years on campus there, where do you put him in terms of, I guess, just the hierarchy of Big Ten coaches? Obviously, you've got probably Jim Harbaugh, Ryan Day right up there at the top. There's been a lot of turnover recently, especially in the West. Where does Bielema fit in there for you? Because between his track record at Wisconsin and now he appears to be basically replicating that at Illinois, it's hard not to put him, I don't know, upper third.
Got to be top 5.
Yeah, I think I'll regret this when I have more time to think about it and realize I
love putting a guy on a spot like that.
But
let me write this down. Brandon Vogel will.
Yeah, I was going to say top 4, but I think top 5 is right. So Harbaugh, Day, yes. James Franklin, he's here. It gets a little murky for me, but I tend to put a ton of value in guys like Bielema, who has done it at multiple places. Mm-hmm. And, you know, even Arkansas.
Big Ten school.
Yeah. Even Arkansas, like, had its moments.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was kind of a weird situation. Conference change is a big deal, of course. But has done it at Wisconsin, and he seems to be replicating it at Illinois. That counts for a lot for me. Kirk Ferentz doing it over the length of time. Mm-hmm. So I think that would probably be my top 5. And you could convince me of any jockeying basically below Harbaugh and Day between Franklin, Ferentz, and Bielema at this point.
Vogues, if you could flock to a position coach that you think has done the best job since he's arrived in Lincoln, who would that be and why? We heard mine on the Husker Radio Network last night.
The one I flocked to immediately off the top of my head is Garrett McGuire. I think he's been super impressive. And it seems that, you know, the camaraderie that he's built with a group of players that is pretty interesting. You know, when you look at Marcus Washington's probably your most proven option. You're bringing back 2 guys who used to be on the team, which could be, you know, difficult to navigate. They've got a bunch of incoming freshmen. And then he's done really, really well, I feel, on the recruiting trail. That's been really, really impressive to me. Ed Foley kind of comes to mind too. You know, he was a little bit of the star of the winter just with how much he's out there. But until we see, you know, a little bit of special teams and what that actually looks like on the field, I'm gonna go with McGuire.
Brandon, I think I'm a Terrence Knighton guy. Am I crazy?
Yeah. No, I don't think so. I mean, that one gets really interesting too when you look at some of those young guys, and they're going to have to play just for depth. But in the spring game, they looked ready to play, which is incredibly impressive because that's a hard position. Maybe second only to offensive line, I think, for a true freshman or even redshirt freshman to be ready to go and log major snaps, just because, you know, most of those guys coming out of high school aren't physically where they will be when they're sophomores, juniors, and seniors. So it's been that's a good call. I think that's pretty. He's done a good job.
Yeah, again, it's Evan Cooper for me, just his ability to recruit and the way he pulls aside people at camps.
It's pretty encouraging that we have 3 different answers, though, and all of them seem like good answers, right?
Point. It's a great point.
Indeed. I would agree. It's been it'll be interesting to see if Matt Rule's speaking at, Texas high school football coaches convention or social event today. I'll be interested to see some of the comments from that. He had a fairly famous speech at that similar event while he was at Baylor, and, Nebraska has quite a bit of attention on it down there at the moment.
Vogel, you've seen a lot of recruiting classes come and go at Nebraska over your time covering the team. What would you say is a good success rate out of the 24 hard commits in the 2024 class?
I think broadly, and, I've looked at this over really since 2011. I kind of used the start of the Big Ten era as a cutoff point. Like, Nebraska has historically lost about 40 to 45% of its signing classes. So you just kind of start there.
Average? Is that pretty average?
It's hard to tell. It's hard to tell because it's tough to compile that much data for that many different schools, which is endlessly frustrating to me. I've often thought about during the summer, do I want to log all the hours to satisfy my own curiosity? And I haven't yet. But I think it's elevated because Nebraska has to recruit so nationally that I think some of it's just inherent to how they have to do things. I wrote about this a long time ago, but it was the highest in the Big Ten West at the time that I looked at it. Not drastically so, but it was the highest. And so I always start from there of like, okay, you have 24 guys, 11 of them probably aren't going to finish their career here. And that might be a good basic marker for this is that, we get 3-4 years down the road, are there only 8 players who maybe left for reasons that were beyond either declaring early for the draft or exhausting their eligibility, particularly with a kind of, it's not Rule's first class, but it's the first class he's been able to, take from start to finish. Those classes become really, really important in what happens over the next 4 or 5 years. And I think if you go back and look, if you can hold those classes together, it's a pretty big boost and a pretty good sign of where the program is at those 4 or 5 years down the road. So I would start there with maybe let's get that attrition rate lower. And then if you do that, I think it's almost inevitable that either people are sticking around even if they're not playing because they really like the culture, or they're becoming contributors, which is of course the easiest way to reduce that attrition rate.
Brandon Vogel, we appreciate your time this morning, man. Thanks so much. Always enjoy it. Have a great week.
You too, guys. Thanks.
That's B-Vogues at Brandon L. Vogel on Twitter. He's the managing editor for Hail Varsity. And you can get your Hail Varsity magazine or subscription, I should say, by using the promo code AR or DB when you sign up. You'll get some money off, and you'll get a team of great writers, Brandon Vogel included, that puts out pieces, the Husker content you're fiending for every day. And you can check that out, hailvarsity.com, or you can get the magazine. And you can sign up even at the restaurant at Hail Varsity Club. There's magazines on every table. You can even take the free copy home. So we appreciate Brandon Vogel. When we come back, let's do the Sports Six Pack.
All right.
Shane's beers are on ice.
Let's go.
He'll crack them open next.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 5 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 4 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 3 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 2 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 1 minute. Rogers and Benning will be back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream with Rogers and Benning on Hail Varsity Radio. Time now for the Sports Six-Pack on Coffee and Cream with Andrew Rogers and Damon Benning. Presented by Zipline Brewing Company, makers of Dear Old Nebraska Brew, the official beer of Nebraska alumni.
Now, all that is 100% true, but today I'm talking about Acres Ale.
Okay.
And the reason for it is because when I got the six-pack, well, we actually got 12 of them as a group up here. And I brought 4 of them home. I sent a couple home with my dad and my brother.
Okay.
Because, well, I sent them each one.
Sure.
And they ended up trying it, ended up loving it. Okay. And you know why? Because it's just like the light beer from your hometown. So whether that's, hey, I'm from Milwaukee and I'm drinking Miller, whether I'm from Colorado, I'm drinking Coors, whether I'm from St. Louis, I'm drinking Bud, it matches up. It's neck and neck with the light beer that you grew up on. It's kind of a beer to get drunk on. I'm not going to lie.
Responsibly.
Right. So if you're looking to have a good time and you want to put some back, and when I say some, I mean a lot, Acres Ale will do the job.
It's an easy drinker.
I'm telling you, it's a really refreshing beer.
Yeah.
Shane, Sports Six Pack presented by Zipline Brewing. Kick us off.
I could go for 6 acres right now.
Question number 1.
Could you run 6 acres?
Like,
how far is that?
Like run it as in like if I was farming it and like, you know.
Yeah, say you were just at one edge of the field.
Or you want me to run.
He wants you to like literally run.
6 acres?
Not manage 6 acres. Run 6 acres.
No.
How far
That's 10 hours.
is 6 acres?
I typed in 6 acres and it came up the bed and breakfast in Cincinnati, Ohio. And it's 10 hours and 41 minutes away. That's not what I'm talking about with 6 acres.
Yeah, I'm not getting a good answer here.
So it's 24,281 meters. So what is that?
But that's square meters, isn't it? So you could
81. No, square meters is 4,000 meters to miles. Let's see here. That's 15 miles.
6 acres is 15 miles. That doesn't seem right.
That's what the calculator says.
Yeah,
and you know, if it's on the internet, it's true.
I'm good on that.
So there is acres of land in a mile. Multiply the number of square miles by 640 to convert square miles into acres. Well, that doesn't help me. No, I'm looking for just in a mile.
Okay, so
Who's smarter than me out there?
I've got dimensions here.
An acre is about the size of a football field. That's what Dylan says. So if it's only 600 yards,
that's only 6. That's fine. Yeah.
Wouldn't it be easier just to go to Zipline so you can just get your acres there?
Yeah,
it would be easier and tastier.
More fun than running 6 football fields.
Question number 1. Theo in Omaha, how do you reassess or reassure or settle down a fan that just says, I just hope they're good? How would you get them to turn defeat into a positive with this 23 team without seeing the game yet?
Wait, so hold on. Let me make sure I understand the question here. How do I get somebody optimistic about 2023 season? Is that basically it?
Yeah, just settle down a fan that says, I just hope they're good.
I mean, I don't think they need to be settled down. I think that's a reasonable hope this year, especially
reasonable response.
Yeah,
to Nebraska football.
Well, yeah, for especially the past decade of Nebraska football, and B, just a lot of unknowns going into this season. I'm going into it just if they make a bowl game, I'll be happy. And I think that's a reasonable expectation to go into it. So if somebody says, I just hope they're good, I don't really
if they
have
make a bowl game. They're good.
That's what I mean. Yeah. Especially considering where they've been. I mean, if somebody just says, hey, I hope they're good, I don't really have a problem with that.
I can understand being down about the team of the past, but I would caution people to go in with the same attitude, the same mindset of years before with the team this year. Because when you have, and I know I'm going to say this, and you don't say when you have a new head coach, because I did that when Scott Frost came in and I thought he was going to, lead us back to greatness. Look, when you have a new head coach, there's a reason to be excited, though.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I'm going to rest at is
new beginnings.
Look, you were happy when Scott Frost came in. A lot of people were. He was the best coach on the market. He just didn't pan out.
Almost everybody was
happy about the new head coach at Nebraska now.
Who was also one of the best coaches on the market.
Who was arguably, in my opinion, the best coach on the market, because you're coming off of an NFL, an NFL caliber tenure.
Yeah.
And you're coming back to college where you had a ton of success before and you rebuilt programs before. There's a reason to stay excited about what's to come in 2023. Plus, I also don't think that Nebraska has the hardest football schedule.
No,
Like,
I have a hard
look at it. You look at Michigan and you're like, okay. Minnesota is this year as a team.
Mm-hmm.
Michigan, you're probably not going to pull that one off.
No,
but you don't have to face Ohio State. You don't have to face Penn State.
Mm-hmm.
You're the two of the three best Big Ten teams you're not seeing this year.
If you can avoid two of those three, you're in good shape.
You'll see Iowa, of course. You'll see Wisconsin with a new head football coach as well. So who knows if they're going to be as good as the projections say that they'll be.
I think Illinois is honestly a tough game. I think Illinois is going to be a tough game. I like Illinois.
There's reasons to be excited about this season.
You don't look at this schedule as overly daunting.
What you need to say, though, is this. Win the non-con games.
Yes, have to.
Win the non-con games.
Yes, absolutely. Especially the non-Power 5 games.
Go into Big Ten play with a winning record.
Yes.
Whether that's you start off with a W or an L.
Yeah.
Go into that game against Michigan with a winning
record. Got to be 3-1. Absolutely.
Question number 2.
You have to survive 20 minutes with one of them for $100 million. Would you pick a grizzly bear, a tiger, a hippo, or an alligator?
Ooh.
Wait, give me those options again.
I'm surprised they didn't say shark since that stuff's going on right now.
You said a tiger, a hippo, grizzly
bear,
okay.
tiger, hippo, or alligator.
And I have to survive 20 minutes with it. Don't people fight bears? Like, don't they go into cages with bears?
I think they usually fight black bears because black bears are a little more chill.
Okay.
Okay.
So
I would take hippo.
Oh no!
No way!
Hippos are murder machines.
Give me an alligator. I'll Happy Gilmore that thing.
I think I'm going with the grizzly bear.
I don't know.
Here's my plan. Okay, with grizzly bears, you're supposed to just play dead. So I either play dead and he doesn't bother me for 20 minutes, or I'm dead. But that's my best chance because you're not beating a physical altercation with any of them.
Well, I'll tell you this, Ravi. I wrestle alligators in my sleep for a living. So this alligator has no chance.
Well, it depends on the size of the alligator, too. There's some of them that are about yay big.
Yeah,
give me a baby alligator. I think I like my chance.
Thrashing around in the bathtub with a baby alligator.
Oh, so are we doing like full growns here? Or?
Just based on size, though, wouldn't you have a better chance to avoid being captured by the hippo?
Dude, hippos run so
They're
fast.
so fast, and they love to murder.
Yes,
they're
do.
So mean.
Yeah, the hippo is definitely not what I'm taking.
With the grizzly bear and the tiger and an alligator, I mean, their movement and their stealth. I mean, I don't think speed really matters.
That damn alligator bit my hand off.
They're all four going to be faster than you anyway.
I'm wondering if we're overlooking the tiger here. People hang out in cages with tigers all the time.
Yeah, the ones that nurtured them growing up.
Well, I'm just saying.
not one that you, like, maybe spooked in the wild.
I'm pretty good with cats. Be like, here, kitty, kitty, kitty.
I'd be like, run, kitty, 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 run.
No, you can't run because then they think it's like, then they think you're prey.
Well, no, I meant the cat run.
You just got to be
run
like,
away from me.
You want to make a little sniff? Little sniff here?
Seems like general consensus on YouTube thinks alligator is the easy choice.
Oh, I think that's a mistake. I really do.
Would you choose the grizzly?
I'm going, you just play dead and hope it leaves you alone for 20 minutes.
How to survive a grizzly bear encounter.
Grizzlies are brown bears. If it's brown, you lie down.
Lay flat on your stomach with your hands clasped behind your neck. Spread your legs to make it harder for the bear to turn you over. Remain still until the bear leaves the area.
See? Just play dead for 20 minutes. That's what I think it's the way to go. Yeah, if it's brown, lie down. If it's black, fight back. That's the rule because black bears don't want to fight you. They'll be like, whoa, easy, man.
Whoa, just take it easy, man.
Black bears are kind of like stoners. They're just like, hey, man, I was just trying to get some food here. I didn't mean nothing by it.
You know,
and brown bears choose violence.
So we're going to Gatlinburg.
Yeah.
Next week as a family, and the place that we're staying at is called Four Bears Hideaway, and there's 4 black bears that like meander the area. Yeah,
if you're black bears, you're okay. Black bears are pretty chill.
Maybe I should read up on bear attacks.
You should
go out.
But if they're black, fight back. So you fight those bears, Andrew.
Yep. Hey, I'm going to tell my brother, hey, Joe, record this. I'm about to fight this black bear.
Listen, if you survive, you'll be famous.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm fighting a baby, and here comes the mama just out of nowhere.
Yeah, you got to watch out, especially the brown bear mamas. Or grizzly bear moms are woof. You don't want to mess with that.
don't want to mess with any mom.
Well, that's fair. Yeah.
Even a human mom.
That's fair.
All right, we'll continue the six-pack when we come back. Questions 3 through 6. I know Shane's thirsty, but he's a slow drinker.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 4 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 3 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 2 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 1 minute. Rogers and Benning will be back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream with Rogers and Benning on Hail Varsity Radio.
All right, welcome back. Sports Six Pack continued. Shane, start us off.
Question number 4.
All of a sudden, you blink. You're in the year 2043, but you're only there for 10 minutes, and you get to one Google search. What are you looking for?
Stock prices.
That's a good one. I would say, like, who won the Super Bowl or who won.
Yeah, stock prices.
I'd probably do a sport event so I could bet on it.
Yeah, I'm doing
take out a loan, make a killing on that, and then I'll text Ravi about what the stock prices are, and then we'll invest together.
Yeah, you look up. So I'll make my money off the stock, and then we'll bet it on your Super Bowl.
Right.
We're gonna tag team this thing.
Yeah. Hey, we missed 3, Shane.
I would do. Oh, well, that was number 4, but I would do previous Super Bowl winners, and it's going to roll up. I mean, you only get one Google search. It's going to roll up like the last 10.
Yeah.
So from
40, if you just type in, a list of Super Bowl winners,
so you're going to get 42 all the way back to 33. So you just got to wait 10 years for you to make your money.
Say less. I'll be like, hey guys, watch this.
So that gives me 10 years to get us some capital to gamble with on the stock prices.
Andrew, Ravi, why are you guys putting $50 million on the Browns to win the Super Bowl?
You
just wait.
We're like Mattress Mac. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so what number are we on? We're on 4?
We got to go to 3 now.
Yeah, we skipped 3, I thought.
We're that far behind?
Question number 3.
Yeah, we did 2 questions.
Wow. Brad in Omaha, I still can't believe this. This is the first time Andrew is watching The Last Dance. What would you say has been your favorite episode so far? And Ravi, what without giving any extra information away, what is your favorite episode?
Here, I'll go first.
Yeah, so we're 4 episodes in.
4 episodes in.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the opening episode about Michael in college. Like that whenever I play video games and you do a My Player and you go back to college, you get to choose your team and then you get to play with the team. Like I just enjoy seeing great players
like origin stories.
In their college uniforms. Not to say that, hey, watching Scotty Pippen wasn't cool and Dennis Rodman wasn't. Just since the documentary is about Michael, I'd say episode 1. I know it's a cop-out answer, but it's still my favorite so far.
I think that's fair. My favorite, it's hard to pick because some of them kind of blur together for me when I'm not watching them in the moment and taking notes on them. But probably, I think it's the second to last one when they're just about to. It's when they're they're doing the Pacers Bulls Eastern Conference Finals in that last season. That's the one I think I enjoy the most, if I'm remembering right. So you have that to look forward to.
Let's go.
No spoilers because it happened 25 years ago. So
right. Right. Hey, thanks for ruining it for me.
What do you mean? Do they win the title this year?
Did they win in 97?
Oh.
All right, Shane, skip to 5.
Question number 5.
The Kansas City Chiefs were crowned the best team. I think I just spit taked right there. If there was a worst team crowned from any sport, who would get that award?
So the ESPYs, they were crowned the best team. So last year, is that a last year question? Let's say it's a last year question. Keep it really recent. So if there was a best team, it was the Chiefs. If there was a worst team, it was the Montreal Canadiens.
Okay.
And here's why.
Yeah, let me have it.
Because it's always
the year before they were in the Stanley Cup final.
Yep.
In 2020, 2021, they were in the Stanley Cup final. Last year, they were the worst team in the NHL.
That's pretty bad.
Yeah. If you go from Stanley Cup final to worst team in the NHL, the Cubs, when they won the World Series, sold everything to get that World Series and still weren't the worst team in baseball.
Right. Yeah.
So to go from best to worst, that's pretty bad.
Yeah, I probably don't have a better answer than that. It's, I was thinking personally, I didn't love the 2022 Red Sox because they were on the cusp of making the World Series in 2021. Totally fell off the map last year, so that was really frustrating for me personally. I don't have a better answer than Canadians, though. That's pretty brutal. That's a tough way to go. That's a bad look.
Imagine the highs and lows of that franchise in 2 years.
Oh, man.
Question number 6.
Seems like $100 million type of day. Would you rather play one blackjack hand for a chance at $100 million or take $1 million right now?
Let's find out, Ravi.
Okay, let's do it.
Would you take $100 million on one blackjack hand? Got a deck of cards handy. You asked me when we walked in, why do you have a deck of cards? Are you going to show me magic tricks? which actually I can do as well.
In a practical sense, I probably take the $1 million because I don't play a ton of blackjack, and $1 million's a lot of money still.
All right, you got the deck.
For the purposes of this, let's play a hand of blackjack for $100 million. I will be expecting a check before I leave.
All right, here we go. Ravi gets a 9.
Niner.
Now, does the dealer put the first one down? Yes.
He burns it?
Yeah. He puts it down. Oh, that's a 10 or 20.
I'm going to go ahead and stay.
Going to stay on that. All right, dealer.
Dealer's got 7, 15.
Uh-oh. 22 bucks.
$100 million, baby.
$100 million.
Bring out the briefcases.
See, I don't know what I would have done in that moment. I mean, gosh, you're right. The practical thing says, hey, take the $1 million, but to have a chance, all right, deal me in.
We're doing another one? All right.
Well, I got to see if I would.
Well, I thought it was just for me. No. I thought it was special. I thought I got the special opportunity. I'll say I might need those. Can I have all the cards?
Well, no, because you don't want to use the same.
Oh, we're doing same hand. All right. All right.
Or same deck.
You're changing the odds for me. I see how it is. A little card counter over here. All right, I'm going to have you split here in just a second.
All right.
Cut the deck. Wherever you'd like, sir.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Here you go.
All right, so first one goes to you.
Yep.
We've got a queen for Mr. Rogers.
Here we go.
First card down. I give you another one now?
Give me another one.
Ooh, we've got a 6. That's a tough spot. Flip mine over. Okay.
I have to hit it.
We're hitting on 16.
Give me a 5.
Oh,
20. I'll stay.
So I flip mine over.
Oh, I was even.
So you don't win $100 million. Sorry, bud.
You don't win $1 million or $100 million.
Loser.
You risk the tie.
Oh, there we go.
Look at that.
So I'm $100 million richer, and Andrew Rogers will be at work tomorrow.
I'm still a broke. You know what? I'll invest my money into the Powerball because that's going to reach $1 billion today.
$1 billion.
And you know what? When I win that, I'll see you later with your $100 million.
And I gotta wait, and I gotta work until 33, so I can bet on the Super Bowl.
Yep. So you start betting on Super Bowls. Start betting on Super Bowls.
See, now I'm just gonna sit here and just shuffle it.
I know. I'll keep some cash for my $100 million to help bankroll your betting operation, Shane.
Yep. And when I win $1 billion, I'll make sure that the cops know that you're cheating.
Prove it. Be like, this guy time traveled.
Hey, all I know is only need is one to prove it.
It's not what you know; it's what you can prove.
Shane, thank you.
Did you enjoy your 6-pack over there, Shano?
Just finishing the last one.
All right, good.
Shane, who would you say was the worst team from last year, though?
No, I was agreeing with you.
In the Canadians?
Yeah,
I think that's a good choice.
Yeah, I mean, it's worst is an interesting word to use because are there teams that were record-wise worse than others? Obviously, but I often think of most disappointing. Like the Canadians were both bad and incredibly disappointing, so that's kind of a nice sweet spot for it there.
Right.
I usually think of, okay, whose expectations did I have at a certain level, and then where did that end up? Obviously, Nebraska was incredibly disappointing, but I don't know that people were expecting a lot out of that season. So maybe they don't qualify. That's an interesting way to phrase it.
I still think Hippo.
You are,
here's the thing.
Way in the minority.
Here's the
Hippo.
thing. Well, here's the thing. I mean, you're seeing all these things come down the on the YouTube. People are talking about that, but they're putting it in scenarios which is towards your liking.
What do you mean, dude? A hippo?
I'm talking
would kill you on land and water.
I'm talking like this guy that says alligator, but put him on the land.
Alligators are ornery because they got all them teeth, but no toothbrush.
It's medulla oblongata.
No, Shane. If you are in water, if you are on land,
I mean, you're dying.
You are dying from a hippo.
You're dying from all three. I mean, or all four, guaranteed.
I don't know. Ravi, he may be onto something with grizzly.
I think I could just take a nap, and the grizzly would be like,
I'm with a lot of people too on gator. The fact that a gator would just kind of sit there for a little bit and just watch you. They may watch you for 20 minutes and you're out of the room. You may not even have to move.
The problem is it depends on the size of the room. We were talking about this off air. It depends on the size of the room we're in, and it depends on how ornery the old alligator is, because I say that jokingly, but some of them sometimes get a wild hair and start like lunging at stuff. If you're in a small room and he starts lunging, you're in trouble. Okay. If you're in a bigger room, you could probably wear him out and get those energy reserves low, as some of our YouTubers were talking about here. True. So I can appreciate that. Size of the room is a pretty big factor here that we didn't account for. Hippo's the worst answer in any scenario, though.
Yes.
Shane, I love you, but Hippo is fourth on the list. I don't know what 1 through 3 are, but Hippo is fourth.
I'm small. I would avoid it. It would just walk over the top
Shane,
of me.
That thing would fling you in the air like you were a baton.
It would walk over the top of me and probably totally miss me. I would be good.
See, where to go? That's why you should have gone grizzly bear. You could just hide from it, lay down. It wouldn't even notice you. You'd be good. Grizzly.
I'm still taking gator.
Grizzly Adams had a beard.
Grizzly Adams did have a beard. We'll take a break. We'll talk a little more sports betting next.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 4 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 3 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 2 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 1 minute. Rogers and Benning will be back in 30 seconds. Varsity Radio with Andrew Rogers and Damon Benning.
Hear ye, hear ye. Welcome back. Coffee and Cream in the morning on Hail Varsity Radio, powered by Currency. Ravi, Lulla, Andrew Rogers. Ravi in for DB this week. We're live from the H&H Chevrolet stage at Hail Varsity Club, 590 ESPN Radio in Omaha, live on Twitter, live on YouTube. Happy to have all of you here joining us and involved in the comment section. The phone number, 888-638-4876. And at this time, let's go to, I should say the phone, but he's joining us via StreamYard. So via video, we'll welcome in Thunder Dan, lead NBA, MLB, NFL, DFS analyst for Roto Baller at Thunder Dan DFS on Twitter. Dan, good morning.
Good morning, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
Hey, thanks for taking some time and joining the show. I feel bad that DB isn't here with you wearing that Steelers hat. He'd be having a love affair with that hat and with you right now.
Good to know there's some Steeler fans outside of Pennsylvania, you know, America's team.
Yeah, something like that. Hey, so I get made fun of a lot, Dan, because I'm a degenerate when it comes to sports betting and the plays that I make. So I kind of want to run some things by you, and whether this turns into a free therapy session or we actually get something out of this, that'd be pretty good, at least for me and for my liking. So I create some dynamite parlays, and it all starts off with home run bets in Major League Baseball. I take 3 or 4 home run hitters and I parlay them together. And I've hit one out of, gosh, I don't know how many, but I hit one last year. So I'm still waiting on my one to hit this year. I'm getting pretty late into the year now, so I'm kind of feeling uneasy. But what do you think? Is that a bad bet or great value because of the odds I can get on it if I'm only throwing $5 down?
I mean, the answer you probably want to hear is not the one I'm probably going to give you, but it's not. It's not really. It's not really plus expected value to do that. Considering you may only hit once or twice all season, and are you going to make your money back even if you are hitting it like a 10 or 20 to 1 like payout? You're probably not going to hit it often enough to make money doing that in the long term. So they're fun. I always tell guys do those, but play with reduce your if you're playing $5 on that and your normal unit is like 20 or 25. That's fine, man. Like, have fun with parlays and stuff. Just don't think you're going to use parlays as like your fundamental, betting pick every night. If you're just betting for fun and throwing a couple dollars here and there, I think the problem is a lot of people get into sports betting and they think I'm going to do this every night and hit these parlays every night, and you're just not. The odds are against you for a reason there.
Dan, I want to continue digging into Andrew's degenerateness a little bit here.
Here we go. See, what did I tell you? What did I tell you?
We'll go off the parlays for a little bit. I'm going to break these down. He also really enjoys the first inning over-unders.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Is there any kind of, I'll call it a niche type bet like that, where you tend to find regular value that you like to hit on, not necessarily in the parlays like Andrew does, but just in general, kind of these things that maybe not a lot of people think about that you can actually get some good value on?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the first inning, I guess you call it the NRFI, no run first inning bets. Those are very popular, and there's data to study there. There's pitcher data. There's all kinds of. I mean, that to me is something that if you want to make that your niche and kind of go after those, that's fine. I mean, you should still probably bet them singles and then parlay them too. I mean, the odds of you hitting a three-legger are not great, but that's great. I love guys that do that, have some success there. There's some guys who with baseball exclusively bet like F5s, first 5 innings, because they don't trust bullpens and they just want to go with starter matchups. My big thing is strikeout props, just because I've had the most success with those. That's kind of my niche in terms of where I've had the most success. I know some guys this year who are really big into walk props, actually going over under on walks. So whatever it is you have found the most success with, I always tell people run with it. I mean, it's home runs are not usually one of those things. I mean, they're fun. They're fun,
hey,
and you should
wait till I hit it, Dan, and I'm going to be in your DMs.
Maybe maybe cut it back to 2. Even if you double up a home run, you're still going to get really 3 is just so hard. Or round robin it. Like if you pick in 3 and you hit a round robin, if you hit 2 out of 3, you're going to make your money back anyways, or maybe a little more. So there's ways to do it where you could give yourself a floor. I call it giving yourself a floor every night and a ceiling. You know, make some straight bets and some things, and then you add to your parlays. And if everything hits, man, you made a bunch of money. If only a few things hit, maybe you make your money back and you live to fight another day.
Okay, so you said you're big into pitching props right now. A lot of times when I'm, sifting through trying to figure out, like, okay, based on previous outings, because to the person that doesn't have all of the information, or they don't pay for certain subscriptions to get that information, they're trying to find it themselves. You normally go back in the game log and see, okay, Shohei Ohtani had 7 Ks, 8 Ks, 10 Ks, but then he had an outing of 3 Ks. And you're like, well, is this going to be one of those 3K nights? Like, how do you assess how much, like, to either buy into the number that they give you, whether it's, hey, I'm going to take a little bit more because the odds are in my favor, or I'll go a little weaker just to play it safe? Or do you just always kind of rest with the over 7.5 that the sports book gives you?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where if you don't have access to some advanced stats and things, you're probably, and you're going off game logs, you're probably, not making plus EV bets all the time. And in that, you look at a game log and you're like, why did he only have 3 or 4 this time? Well, he faced a team that doesn't strike out that much, right? And sometimes it's just that he didn't have his best stuff, or he was walking a lot of guys. So there's a bunch of things I look at, whether it's walk rates, strikeout rates. I think recency, of course you want to look at the game log and see this guy's hit 7 straight strikeouts in like 4 or 5 straight games. That gives you the confidence that you need. But unless you really have like a true projection, or like some kind of ability to at least have in my brain, I can look at in the morning and kind of make my own projections just because I do it every day. But unless you really have something where you can say, hey, I know that, this guy is a 30% strikeout pitcher and he's facing a 25% strikeout team, you're basically kind of just guessing a little bit. So any kind of information or stats that you can use to inform your process more, rather than just recent performance and game logs, is always going to be lately better bets.
Dan, so I'm a big futures bet fan. I feel like a lot of times that's where you get the best value. I also understand that most of them are probably not going to hit if you're taking anything outside of the first handful of favorites. First of all, how do you feel about futures bets? And secondly, if you do ever make those, what's kind of your evaluation process of kind of balancing the likelihood of something happening versus the value on the odds you're getting?
Yeah, I mean, I do like futures a lot. I don't make them a ton in comparison to the daily bets, just because I do so much daily content. But I do them for all the big 3 sports. With any sport that you're betting futures on, I think it makes sense to kind of have an approach where first of all, you're probably betting 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 of the same people for the same result. Like, I would not probably go over that, but you're creating like a basket, like you're putting 3 guys in a basket and you're saying, I think one of these 3 guys is going to win this award or lead the league in this stat. And if you do that, you can kind of mix your risk in a little bit. Like, you can put, I probably wouldn't bet the favorite very often, because usually that you're not getting a lot of great value there, but you can put someone who's in the top 3 or 4 odds in there. You can put someone who's more of a 10-to-1 type thing, and then you can always put a long shot in there too, like a 20-to-1. And you're saying, hey, I have 3 people that I think if the first guy hits at 5-to-1, hey, I've won 5 units on 3, right? You still win money, right? But even if the most favored guy wins, and if you're 10-to-1 hits, I mean, you're really making a lot of money. You're 21 hits, so it's kind of this approach of like mixing your risks within those future bets too, because again, you're giving yourself like and of course, nobody wins, you lose, but like give yourself a floor and a ceiling. I've talked a lot about just giving yourself, because again, you miss all 3 bets and you're out and you lost 3 units, so I'm always preaching like sustainability with betting, like making sure you don't, spend all your money or go into debt or whatever else, in terms of, being able to feed your habit, right? Everybody likes to do this. It's supposed to be fun. It's not supposed to be stressful, and keep it going day to day, week to week, month to month, season to season.
Dan, stay with the futures here because I got a few questions, one in the MLB and then a few on the NFL side. So in Major League Baseball, one future I really liked out of the All-Star break, and I'm a Cardinal fan, so it's a little biased, but I like the Cardinals over 75.5. I mean, you had to predict that they'd have a better second half of the season than they did in the first half. But are there any over-under futures and win totals that you really like in Major League Baseball right now?
So I haven't looked at those that closely lately, but I would think that your Cardinals bet makes a lot of sense because they're just way too talented, at least offensively. I know they have some holes in their pitching staff that they need to address, maybe some guys who can pitch better in the second half. But, I mean, we saw that their offense just the last week or two has really come alive. They're getting healthy. They're getting Tyler O'Neill back this week, right? And they kind of
we'll see if he plays, if they actually play him.
Yeah, that's true. He had that whole thing where they weren't playing a whole lot, but I would think they would want to get him out there just because he's a stud. If he's on, he's an elite player. So I like your Cardinals bet a lot. I think that division is totally up for grabs. There's some pretenders there. Obviously, my Pittsburgh Pirates are not going to last very long. I think the Cincinnati Reds had their hot streak and are loaded with prospects, but unless they make a deal for some pitching, Hunter Green's hurt. Lodolo's hurt. Like they don't have the pitching to kind of keep up what they're doing, and so like other than Milwaukee, and the Cubs are fading too. Other than Milwaukee, I think St. Louis can come back and they could even win this division if you wanted to go out there and make them to make the playoffs. Like I'm trying to find where their odds would be for that to make the playoffs. Cardinals, doing a quick scroll here. Where are they at? Oh. To make the playoffs, they're plus 1,300. So, I mean, if you think I mean, that's some nice odds. I mean, again, if you think they can go on a run here and string together some wins and win the division, it's not totally out of the question. I would.
Yeah, they're definitely a team that has margin for error. One of those like New York Mets, Philadelphia Phillies type of teams that at any point, because of the talent that they have, you'd have to expect they just find a new gear.
Right, exactly. And I mean, they're only 11 games out of first place. I'm looking at the standings now. They're tied with Pittsburgh. But again, Pittsburgh's fading. They brought young guys up. They're playing over their head. Chicago could be sellers. Cincinnati's gonna probably fade a little bit down the stretch too. It's there for the taking. It's 11 games with this many games left is really not much for them if they got hot. So without looking at any other teams, I mean, I'm just going off your Cardinals one here. I haven't had a chance to really look at too many MLB futures. Or at least win total futures. But yeah, I like that bet.
We'll stick with MLB futures here for a second. I've been looking at World Series winner futures, where I'm looking Braves are a pretty heavy favorite there. Don't know how good a value you get. Is there anybody in that kind of next group? I'm looking at Tampa plus 500, Dodgers plus 550, Astros plus 750. Anybody in kind of that next group that you look at and see some pretty good value there?
Well, I mean, you named the other three kind of teams that I would say are worthy. Tampa Bay at plus 600. I mean, the problem with Tampa Bay is just they are going to run out of arms eventually. Like they just all their starters just keep getting hurt, and I worry about that. I mean, Texas is plus 1,200. Yeah, and I think they arguably have the best offense in baseball. Like at least they have for this far into the season. If they would make a deal for another starting pitcher and they go into the playoffs with an ace plus Eovaldi, maybe they could get. That's obviously their big weakness is pitching down the stretch, but that offense is really good. I mean, I think the AL is pretty much wide open in terms of the Yankees kind of have fallen apart and. Gosh, even the Baltimore Orioles at plus 2,000 are.
Wouldn't that be something,
right? I mean, I'm only an hour and a half north of Baltimore here in central Pennsylvania, and they're exciting, man. They're fun. They got young starting pitching like Tyler Wells and Kyle Bradish are coming on. There have been talks about them trading for I don't know, maybe Ohtani, but like maybe at least another high end kind of starting pitcher that could push them a little bit over the top. And their bullpen is lights out. So I mean, between Texas and Baltimore in the AL, I would look at those teams. The Phillies are plus 1,700 right now, and gosh, they were there last year. I mean, they've got the talent certainly. If they can put it together, that division is just so tough. They probably have to do it like as a wild card. I don't know if they're going to overtake Atlanta, but I would look at even some of those outside the 10-1 odds in just terms of like those odds are going to evaporate. If any of those teams go on runs here in the second half, they're going to really tighten up. So there's a chance to maybe get in on something, a pretty good value there.
We can bounce back and forth if we need to, but I want to ask you a couple of NFL futures here.
Right.
Some that I passed along to Shane to get to you because there were 3 win totals that really piqued my interest. It was the Colts over 6.5 or set at 6.5. I would have taken the over. It was the Rams at 6.5. I think that's a good under. And then it was the Carolina Panthers who were given 7.5 in Bryce Young's rookie year, which shocked me a little bit. Like, I know it's only one more win than they gave Anthony Richardson in Indianapolis, but it seems like the Colts are well off more than the Panthers in this case.
Yeah, so I'm going to agree with you on 2 out of 3, right? Because you said over on the Colts, right?
Mm-hmm. That is correct.
And under on the Panthers.
Yes, and I have under on the Rams too.
So here's where so let's talk about the young quarterbacks first. So I agree with you that Indianapolis has more surrounding Richardson in terms of a running game, a pretty decent offensive line, I think respectable defense, kind of more of a complete team. I guess Richardson has a ton of question marks in terms of his throwing ability and whether he can really, run. Like obviously he's going to run the ball, but like move the offense down the field and lead to a lot of points. But I do think that those numbers should be flipped. Like Indianapolis probably should be sitting at 7.5 and Carolina at 6.5, in my opinion. I think 7.5 for Carolina is giving them way too much credit. I know they play in a weak division. That's going to help them out. There's going to be some winnable games there in the division. But, I mean, they just don't have a lot to go with Bryce Young. I mean, I think he's going to have his work cut out for him. Now, I'm curious about why you're under on the Rams because I feel like the Rams are a pretty big bounce back kind of candidate this year.
Yeah, so the reason I'm low on them is their defense took a major step back last year. I can't imagine they're going to take a huge leap forward with how much they aged out. And it's just the roster is just very weak. You're getting Stafford back, you're getting Kupp back from injury, which is good. But even if they carry the weight, you still have an older quarterback. And I like Stafford. I think Stafford's a good quarterback, but I don't know if he can compete with the best of them as long anymore. I mean, he seems now that injuries could be a part of his future. Cooper Kupp, I could see him getting traded at some point so that the Rams can rebuild. They don't have any picks. Like they hardly have any draft picks to even build a team in LA right now. So I don't see any reason that they'd win more than 5 games.
Yeah, it's tough because you kind of have to know a little bit more about. I mean, this is a situation where the first 3 or 4 games of the season could totally dictate everything. If they came out and won a few games, right, and they open up here on their schedule, they open up with like Seattle, San Francisco, Cincinnati. That's tough. They could potentially go 1-2, 0-3. If they come out and go down early, right, you could see a sense of the organizational direction to be. We need to start a rebuild. We need to get something back because we have no picks and. We just want to tank. I don't know if they come out and win a few games, if they think they're gonna, not necessarily contend, but be a respectable team and go out there and compete all year. Then I think 7 games is pretty doable when you consider they play Arizona twice and they have Washington on the schedule and they have New Orleans. And I'm looking at some very winnable games there if they are at that point of the season trying to win. So if anything, my initial lean was over, but I do understand where you're coming from too, and I would say maybe just even faded. I have a couple other totals if you want to talk about a couple other teams too. Okay, so 2 of the other ones that I wrote up for my Substack folks would be I got the Vikings over 9.5 or 8.5. They're set at 8.5. This is a 13-win team from last year.
Yeah,
I mean,
true. They have the NFC North really up for grabs.
That's so okay. So maybe the Lions and Bears will be improved, but are they going to? I think they can still split with those 2 teams. The Packers will be arguably worse, or the same, or not very good. So their division isn't all that strong, and their non-conference schedule. I'm pretty sure they get the NFC South in there, so they have the worst division in football for 4 games. They could arguably sweep that. I think 9 wins I think that's just. 8.5 is so low for a team that won 13 games. They have Cousins back. They have Jefferson back. They're going to have a good offense. I know their defense has some holes, but that to me, and it was like minus 130 when I hit it. I'm not
right.
sure.
Yeah, you know what's funny about that too is I've noticed with some of these NFL over/under win totals is all the teams that are supposed to really compete, like the divisions that really aren't one-sided, they have high win totals because Vegas doesn't want to they don't want to map it out and say, hey, I don't think the Packers are going to be good. Hey, I don't think the Bears are going to be good. Because I think the Bears are set too high as well. Like, I think they were given at 7.5, and I'm like, what? This team won 3 games last year.
Right.
And so when you have that baseline, it's so hard to even pick a team from that division because you don't know who's going to take on the losses, because the Vikings could be the team that just takes on the losses in the NFC North.
It's true. Yeah, it's certainly, with any of these, you'd never know. We never know at the beginning of the season how the season's going to unfold. But to me, that just seemed like a weird number for a team that had so much success. The other one, and then this gets more interesting with the Barkley situation, but the Giants are set at 7.5 at plus 100. That to me seems like value if Barkley plays. Tough
schedule though.
A tough schedule for sure, but they got pretty good defense. They've made some improvements on offense in terms of bringing some guys in. I think probably the people are banking on last year being more of a fluke, but I don't know. They play hard for that coach, man. They play hard. They 8 wins. They got Washington on the schedule twice. They definitely have a few non-conference games that are winnable there. If Barkley sits out, that really throws us into question a little bit. But that struck me as when I'm looking for value on teams that had success last year and are projected to be at least respectable or not. I mean, 7.5 for the Giants compared to 7.5 for the Panthers. Like, come on, that seems like a no-brainer to me. But those are the two that I had circled last week when I did a little write-up on these.
Dan, we got about 90 seconds with you left. When you're looking at these NFL win totals, is there any part of you that likes to kind of, not in a parlay necessarily, but maybe double down on, let's say, a win total and then a player prop? Like, for instance, if you think Sean Payton's going to turn around Denver, would you maybe hit the over on the 8.5 and maybe a player prop on something with Russell Wilson? Because those seem like they're going to go hand in hand.
Correlation in bets is great. Is a great idea. You sometimes have to be careful that you don't put too many eggs in one basket. But if you feel pretty strongly about a certain team or a certain situation being improved or obviously being much, much worse, it makes sense to correlate your bets. Yeah, I'm betting on if the Bears are this good, then Justin Fields is going to get this number. Right. Totally makes sense doing that. Yes.
Dan, we appreciate your time this morning, man. Thanks so much. This was fun. We'll have to do it again soon.
Awesome, guys. Thanks so much for bringing me on. I had a great time.
That is Thunder Dan Paylo. Hopefully I pronounced his last name correctly there.
I mean, when you go by Thunder Dan, you don't even need a last name.
No. But he brings the lightning with these picks. I'll tell you that.
Oh, I see what you did there.
Andrew, you missed out on he brings the thunder. No, that's too easy. I had to go a little more adventurous with that. We appreciate Dan's time at Thunder Dan DFS on Twitter. So when we come back, we will get into our Illinois breakdown, our schedule breakdown, and then we will talk to Scott Richey to close out the show so that we can get the expert's opinion after we give our own, because we all know that Ravi and I don't know as much as they do out in Illinois. But we'll get some of our questions answered, and if you have any questions too, just get them in via the chat room on YouTube. We'll take a break.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 5 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 4 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 3 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 2 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 1 minute. Rogers and Benning will be back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream with Rogers and Benning on Hail Varsity Radio.
Coffee and Cream in the morning welcomes you back. Happy to have you with us. Ravi, Lulla, Andrew Rogers, live from the H&H Chevrolet stage at Hail Varsity Club. Let's get into more of the Nebraska schedule breakdown as we've been doing this week and last. Illinois, October 6th, that game on Friday. And it's the day right before the bye week for Nebraska. Illinois is an interesting group this year. It posted its first winning season since 2011 last fall. They finished 8-5 overall, Ravi. They've won 5 games, or they won 5 games in Big Ten play last year. They ended up losing their defensive coordinator to Purdue. He's now a head coach. No Chase Brown, no Tommy DeVito, no Devin Witherspoon. Their secondary has dwindled down.
All 4 starters from the secondary.
Yep. Now, this is the 3rd year in a row Bielema is working with a fresh quarterback, a fresh face at QB, and it's transfer Luke Altmaier. And I think he is the biggest wild card of this team this year.
Probably.
I wouldn't even say it's the defense, because where the defense was last year, you would assume they'll take a little, like a minor step back because of a new coach and a new secondary, but they still have an All-American up front.
That front is so good that you're gonna expect them to still have some level.
They'll have the run defense, right?
You're talking
comes
about
down to pass defense, really.
Between 2 linemen and 2 outside linebackers, you're talking about 4 all Big Ten guys.
Well, Jerzan Newton is an All-American.
You got Randolph on the line, and then you've got Jackus and Coleman in the outside linebacker spots. Their defensive front's going to be as stingy as anybody's in the league this year.
Freshman All-American at linebacker. They lost their top 3 defensive backs this season, which is why we have been honing in on the secondary there. But Luke Altmaier is interesting because Brett Bielema came out and said he's the best quarterback he's ever had.
He's definitely the most talented he's had at Illinois, and it's not close. Talent, because that's the thing with Tommy DeVito, right? A lot of experience, pretty limited as a quarterback, right? So you kind of knew what you were getting from him, but you weren't going to get a lot. And so they kind of went in a different direction with this year's quarterback, another transfer from Ole Miss, former 4-star guy, really, really talented. But I think he threw 54 passes in 3 years at Ole Miss.
Right.
So you have almost nothing to go on in terms of body of work. So that, you're right, enormous wild card is just, what is Luke Altmaier? Right. Is he the 4-star, or is he the guy that couldn't get on the field?
See, and the way I'm leaning right now is I'd probably expect more of Tommy DeVito 2.0 in the beginning. Like more than an upgrade on the field. So like you know his talent's there. You just built that up in that last point. But I'm not currently seeing anything right now to tell me that he isn't more than what Tommy DeVito was for this team last year. Because are you going to move away from running the ball like you did last year?
Probably not.
Probably not. So you're most likely going to get another Tommy DeVito in that spot that is going to be directing traffic more than he's going to be airing the football out for those big chunk plays. Not to say Luke Altmaier can't do that better than Tommy DeVito did, but I have to see it before I say it.
I think the difference is going to be, you're right, the meat and potatoes of this offense is going to be running the football. It's Brett Bielema, right? He's got this enormous offensive line. I mean, these guys are across the board like 6'6", 320, if not bigger in some spots. Huge offensive line. And the running back room is an enormous running back room. They've got like 3 guys running 240 or more in the backfield. And so they're going to be pounding the football, right? I think what they're hoping, this is my guess, is they're hoping that Luke Altmaier can stretch the field just occasionally enough to loosen things up for the running game a little bit. I don't think you're going to see him throwing 40 times a game. I don't think you're going to see him throwing 30 times a game. He's probably going to be living in that. If Brett Bielema gets his way, he's probably living in that like 15 to 20 attempts range. And if he's living there, things are going well for Illinois.
Now I'll tell this too. Coaches don't normally hand out compliments as easy as he's the best quarterback I've ever had here. They'd compare that person to another guy and leave it at that before assigning
or
that
just say we
tag.
have a lot of confidence in him.
Right. You don't normally get he's the best quarterback we've ever had here, which leads me to believe, and I brought this up with Vogel. I brought this up just in the last segment about win totals. It leads me to believe that 7 wins is manageable for this Illinois team.
Absolutely. It's manageable. And they avoid both Ohio State and Michigan on the schedule. They've got Penn State, which is going to be their toughest game of the year, but avoiding 2 out of the 3 big dogs in the other side of the on the other side of the Big Ten is a huge advantage for them this year. And if you can, I think they probably have about half their games that are coin flips. If you win half of those, which is theoretically what you should do in coin flip games, right? That puts them at about 8 wins. Pretty easily above their that 6.5 number. I think that number is too low for Illinois. Now, here's the thing you have to keep in mind, though. Historically, Illinois has not dealt well with success.
That is correct. They've always taken a step back after they've taken a step forward.
Especially when there's expectations, right?
But they also didn't have Brett Bielema at that time.
Exactly. So you're going back 20 years. You're going back to Kirk Kittner in 2001. They fall back in 2002. You're going back to Juice Williams in 2007. They fall back in 2008. They've had a hard time building on success and stacking successful years. They also haven't had a guy who's done it in the Big Ten before. So that's going to be really interesting to me to see if the Brett Bielema effect can break the Illinois effect, if you will.
Right. Yeah, because he did it at Wisconsin, and now he's doing it at Illinois. The biggest keys to success for this team will be Reggie Love needs to be the guy. They need him to be that workhorse, that Chase Brown-like guy in the back.
See, I don't even think it's going to be Reggie Love. I think it's going to be Josh McCray.
And it could be shared. But I believe they're leaning Love right now.
Yeah, I mean, and they might be. I think,
and that's a good question for Scott Richey.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a running back by committee for sure. But just the way McCray looked as a freshman in 2021, I think they're really excited about him hopefully being healthy this year. Now, that obviously didn't happen last year, so that's a huge question mark. But both those guys, for sure, Reggie Love and McCray, are going to have to be big for them.
Well, and that's the biggest offensive question. Who's going to put up the numbers Chase Brown put up last year?
Yeah.
Now, defensively, we mentioned the secondary. You would think they need to get up to speed pretty quick here. And then Altmaier either needs to elevate to the quarterback that they, do you recruit a transfer that you brought him in to be?
Yeah.
Maybe that's the best way to say it. Or does he just stay right on the path that he's on right now, or the so-called Tommy DeVito path that I said to open things up? There's some bits and pieces that they need to figure out, but I don't think they're in bad shape either, because if you really take a look at what they've done defensively over the course of, all of this, they were third in total defense last year, first in interceptions, first in the nation in takeaways. They were first in scoring allowed. This seems pretty easy for Aaron Henry to step into because he was there last year.
They promoted from within.
Promoted.
So same system, even though it might look a little different.
But when you lose talented guys like a top 10 pick in Witherspoon, it's not going to be easy to buy and replace.
Yeah, they're definitely going to have to rely on that defensive front to take pressure off of the back end of the defense. They're going to need Newton to create a lot of pressure and Randolph to create a lot of pressure to make sure that those guys on the back half don't have to defend for very long and keep them out of bad situations. I also think you're going to see Illinois was incredible at controlling possessions and controlling the clock last year. I think you're going to see them attempt to do that again. And that's why, Luke Altmaier doesn't have to be a world beater. If he can hit a few throws a game that loosen things up for the running game,
he doesn't have to light the world on fire.
No, he doesn't. And he's got Isaiah Williams back at wide receiver who can be a home run type threat. Now they need someone else to step up in order to help take some pressure off of Isaiah Williams and take some of the defensive focus away from him.
I think their wide receiving room is going to be okay.
I think it is too, but they do need somebody to step up outside of Williams. They have options that I think I like, but if you can get Williams and another guy to produce, Altmaier's life is going to be a lot easier.
Man, this seems like the best wide receiving room they've had in years, though, in regards to returning.
Oh, I think so. Yeah.
Luke Altmaier has everything working for him,
and I think the line's going to be really good.
Oh, the lines are their strength.
Yes.
Offensive and defensive line.
There's more questions on the offensive line, but I think it's going to be fine because it's Brett Bielema.
Scott Richey joins the show next. We'll talk more Illinois football, get his ideas on the team, what he's been seeing, knowing that that's who he covers and that team's in his backyard. We'll talk that next.
Rogers and Benning will be back in 4 minutes. Coffee.
Williams scoops it up with a catch over the middle, sprints down the left sideline. Huskers have been prone to big plays, and the Illini get a big one there. Touchdown, Illinois.
In 3 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 2 minutes. Rogers and Benning will be back in 1 minute. Rogers and Benning will be back in 30 seconds. Coffee and Cream with Rogers and Benning on Hail Varsity Radio.
Illini in Husker territory. Pressure comes. DeVito dumps. Got his man caught. First down. 35-30. Isaiah Williams down the left sideline. Might score. He will. Touchdown. Touchdown, Illinois. And Isaiah Williams scoops it up with a catch over the middle, sprints down the left sideline. Huskers have been prone to big plays, and the Illini get a big one there. Touchdown, Illinois.
Oh, Shane, can we get that for the intro tomorrow?
No.
Please, just that part. Please? No. You like to play the Shohei Ohtani home run call from Japan.
Yeah, but that wasn't, no. Unless, I tell you what, unless our guest would like it.
I'm sure he would. Scott Richey joins the show now. Illinois men's basketball and football for the News Gazette at SR Richey on Twitter. Scott, good morning.
Morning, guys.
Hey, thanks for taking some time with us this morning. We've been doing a schedule breakdown for just Nebraska football all the way up until now when we got to Illinois, so we're happy that you chose to take a little stop with us here. After assessing the team, obviously it looks different. No Ryan Walters on defense this year. You had an internal hire, and Aaron Henry step up to take over the first in the nation in takeaways team, the first in interceptions, third in total defense, and so forth. And I think the question on everybody's mind is, can he replicate what we saw out of Illinois last year with Ryan Walters?
I mean, that is the question, and it's a tough task considering just how good the Illinois defense was a year ago. To be considered, one of the best, if not the best defense, especially when it came to the scoring defense in the country, like repeating that is tricky. But I think they can still be really good on that side of the ball. Aaron Henry, worked hand in hand with Ryan Walters in the secondary, developing that group that just had, 4 of the 5 mostly, wind up on an NFL roster, 3 being drafted, 1 Devin Witherspoon, going, in the top 10 to the Seahawks. So I think it was the no-brainer move for Brett Bielema just to stay in-house and move Aaron Henry up. And obviously Brett Bielema, his experience comes on the defensive side of the ball. He had his fingerprints all over, what Ryan Walters executed the last 2 years. So they'll still be good. It'll be different. The secondary goes from super experienced, super productive to pretty young across the board. But, the strength, I think, flips up front where they got Johnny Newton and Keith Randolph to return inside, plus Seth Coleman and Gabe Akis, on the outside providing pressure. So it'll, I think, take a little bit of a different approach, perhaps, maybe more oriented up front, but still, I think, should be a pretty good defense.
Looking at that back end and who they've got to replace, obviously Tavion Nicholson, probably the primary corner this year. Some of the other guys, whether it's Tyler Strain, Matthew Bailey, Demetrius Hill, what are some of those guys you're looking at to step up, and how do you think how do you think they'll do in terms of who they've got available and who they've got to replace?
Yeah, so Taz Nicholson is like the one probably guaranteed starter at one of the cornerback spots. He had a pretty good season last year. Got hurt at the end, broke his wrist. He missed a couple games at the end of the year, including the bowl game. But he was healthy this spring, got back to it, and he's the veteran now of that group. But Matthew Bailey, as a true freshman last year, really stood out. Like, he was unheralded as a recruit could get, really. One of the last additions to the class. Didn't really have, any other FBS offers to speak of. But, not only does he, kind of look like he could have been one of the Brown siblings, and kind of sounds like Chase and Sidney Brown, but like he plays a little bit like Sidney Brown at safety. So I think they're really, counting on a really good sophomore season from him. Then I think the wild card is the guy you mentioned, Demetrius Hill, was a freshman All-American at Florida International last year. Put up good numbers, has good size, and I think fits exactly what Illinois wants in it's secondary. So I'm curious to see what he can do in the Big Ten. Whether he can kind of parlay his success at FIU into at least that, or maybe more with the Illini. But then the other spots are up for grabs. There's going to be a lot of young guys, a lot of competition, I think, this fall to kind of see who winds up in those spots.
Scott, strength is on the lines. Offensive line returns 3 starters. Your D line, of course, gets second-team All-American Jerzan Newton back. What position group would you say, though, isn't as top-notch in your eyes? Not that the alarm bells are going off, but one can be boom or bust.
I think it's probably on the offensive side, and it's either quarterback or running back, because Illinois has to replace both. Tommy DeVito sort of parachuted in for one season and brought an incredible amount of swagger and confidence and production to that spot. And obviously Chase Brown was, Doak Walker finalist, one of the top running backs in the country, and heavily used, last year. So they brought in 2 transfer quarterbacks, Luke Altmaier from Ole Miss, John Paddock from Ball State. Luke Altmaier is the starter. Brett Bielema won't say it, so I'll go ahead and do it. But Luke's the starter. But John is, in his 5th year, was a starter all last season at Ball State. Has the experience. If things go awry, like you've got a guy that's you're not going to be flustered that you can throw in there. But Luke Altmaier, he's the starter, and it played pretty well this spring for the limited amount that we actually got to see him. Running back, it's not exactly a toss-up. You know, a healthy Reggie Love will be important. A healthy Josh McCray certainly will be important because he wasn't really at all last year. Those are probably the top two guys, and different style backs. Reggie Love a little more Chase Brown-ish. Haven't had that potential, haven't seen it fully realized yet. Josh McCray obviously fits into the bigger back category that Brett Bielema certainly seems to like. Those are your top two, and then the Aiden Lawfrey, who's more their speed back, and then Jordan Anderson. Both those are redshirt freshmen. And then Caden Fagan, who's a local area kid, four-star recruit, true freshman, enrolled early. He also just a really large human being to be a running back like Jordan Anderson and Josh McCray. It's kind of like five guys for three spots. I doubt we'll see Chase Brown level usage where he got essentially 90% of the carries last year. So I think it'll be more of a mix, and then we'll see. But those are, I think, probably the two biggest question marks because they're moving on from the two guys that were awfully productive, and we'll see what they can do there. And because it's important, obviously. Those are two guys that touch the ball a lot.
Scott, I want to ask you about expectations this season for Illinois. Historically, they've had trouble stacking quality seasons up on one another, going all the way back to the Kirk Kittner era. What is expected around Champaign right now in terms of how this team should perform? And is there any, I guess, hesitation or caution because of the fact that historically Illinois has had a little bit of trouble stringing good seasons together?
Yeah, I think there's a mix of some anticipation of what could be coming off the best season of Illinois football in 15 years, with combined with this idea, some Illinois fans like it's Illinois football that can't really be trusted sometimes. But I think baseline is like get back to a bowl game.
Mm-hmm.
Like consecutive bowl games are super rare in program history. So just, even if it's going 6-6, just get to a bowl game.
Mm-hmm.
But that's like bottom level expectation. The schedule, like on one hand, it looks like it sets up pretty easily, and maybe not easily. I don't think anything's ever easy, but sets up nicely. How about that? For Illinois? But then you look at the non-conference schedule. Like Toledo brings back a ton. Is really good, MAC program. Kansas is on the upswing. Florida Atlantic. They've got a new coach, but like Tom Herman hasn't forgotten what he knows about football, and he's been successful. So like it's a little tricky. And then I think the Big Ten West is as open as it has ever been, and this will be the final year. I think everyone in the West, except for Northwestern, obviously, has a feeling that they can win it. So, that would be huge for Illinois. It's never won a division title since Big Ten went that route. So to snatch one on the last year that divisions exist would be a kind of neat for them. But I think just continuing to advance the program in the right direction under Brett Bielema, like that's the goal. Like he said when he was hired, like he wants to build Illinois into a consistent winner, which is something that really hasn't been the case for the program. So there's been progress in year 1 and year 2, and we'll see if they can keep it going in year 3.
Scott, we appreciate your time this morning. Thanks so much. We'll talk again once the game gets closer.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. It's Scott Richey, Illinois men's basketball and football for the News Gazette at SR Richey on Twitter. Before we send you home, let's tell you who's back in action tonight.
Who is it?
The Omaha Storm Chasers. Turn that hat around. Let people know. Come on, Ravi. Yeah. That baby blue is sick, by the way. You won't get that hat as a giveaway, but you could find that hat in their team store, and you can be just like Ravi. Put a headset on, and you're an honorary member of Coffee and Cream.
I'd rock that hat.
That hat is sick. They have the St. Paul Saints all this week. Tons of great promotions throughout the week as well. And then, of course, Thursday's the day that everybody likes to be at the ballpark because it's $2 deal day.
That's right.
That's $2 dogs and $2 beers. We appreciate your time this morning. We will see you tomorrow.